Hey guys, how are you all? Come back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto locked away as a baby. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. As far as he knew, he didn't have a name. Even his earliest memories provided no hint, since he had been called freak, demon, and monster as far back as he could remember. At first, in his childish innocence, he had glowed with pride at the variety he was given. No other child had so many names, and he learned quickly that he was special. He had reveled in this discovery before it happened. A raised fist, a burning face. He had been silly then, for he had cried out in pain and been rewarded with no dinner. It had confused him. He thought he was special. But apparently being special meant that he was the only one not allowed to eat, that he was the only one the other children were encouraged to mock, that he was the only one to be beaten and tossed aside like nothing. He had been very young then, and had had no strength with which to fight back. Even now at the ripe age of 6 years old, he hadn't really found a way to resist what happened to him. Now he accepted his specialness, and when those names reserved especially for him were called, he responded. Despite the pain that usually ensued, he felt better knowing that at least he had a place in this world and that he was someone. Although he still lived in the orphanage, he avoided it as much as possible. This arrangement seemed to work best for the woman in charge. He didn't know her real name, but all the children called her Mama-san. In the beginning, he had thought she was a mean person since she liked to hit people, but then he realized that the only one she hit was him. It had caused him to think about what was wrong with him, since he tried to copy the others but was always time and time again singled out. He finally guessed that it had something to do with the weird markings on his body, the whiskers on his face and the strange tattoo-like thing on his stomach. Once, when he had taken off his shirt in the summer heat, Mama-san's eyes had fixed on his abdomen and he had witnessed true hate manifested there. Immediately, she ordered him to cover up and had forced several sweaters over his skinny frame to hide the strange marking. Then, she had dragged him up the stairs and shoved him in the attic, telling him before she left that if he so much as thought about taking off the sweaters, that he would never eat again. He had gulped in fear since she barely fed him as is, and he really disliked the rumbling of an empty and desperate stomach. He didn't know how long he had stayed in that attic. Gaps appeared in his memory whenever he blacked out from the heat, and there were no windows or indicators of time passing. He only knew when Mama-san returned, yanked off all but one sweater, pulled him downstairs into a bedroom, and told him to make himself presentable. Dizzy and famished, he had swayed on the spot but nodded complacently, wondering if he had won a victory when she didn't strike him. The thought had filled him with warmth before a knock came on the door and in entered an old man wearing white robes. He was surprised when the old man came directly over to him, and he mentally prepared to be hit. Instead, the man simply knelt before him. "Hello, Naruto." "Naruto? What was that?" Was the old man talking to him? Didn't he know that he was special? "Hello," he answered shyly, staring at his feet. "Do you remember me, Naruto? I came and visited you a while ago." He decided that he liked the man's voice. It was soft and gentle, unlike the jeering and spitting he experienced from nearly everyone else. He murmured, trying to think. Unfortunately, his brain was rather fuzzy and he couldn't really keep anything straight. "I dunno." The old man smiled. "That's all right. You were a little younger, so perhaps not. Anyway, who are you?" he burst out. He could hear a hiss from the doorway where Mama-san was obviously eavesdropping on their conversation. "Well, Naruto, I'm the Hokage. I'm the leader of all of Konoha," the Hokage stated patiently. Naruto racked his mind and thought of all the people he had seen on only his brief excursions into town. "Wow, you lead lots of people," he exclaimed. The Hokage chuckled. "I suppose I do. So who's that guy over there in the dog mask? Is he a friend of yours? Do you play with him?" The Hokage laughed again. "He is part of the Anbu, a secret class of shinobi, some of whom protect me. I guess we are friends, but we don't play together very often." "Who does he protect you from?" "Bad guys," the Hokage answered simply. The old man's wrinkled face creased into a frown when Naruto grew downcast. "What's wrong, Naruto? You came to get rid of me." The Hokage was horrified. "No, not at all. What makes you think that?" "I'm a bad guy," Naruto said to his feet. "You came to get rid of me and that's why you're talking to me." The Hokage put a bracing hand on Naruto's shoulder and recoiled slightly when he brushed across the boy's neck. "Naruto, you're burning up. Here, let's get this off you." The Hokage helped Naruto ease out of the enlarged sweater, cursing that he had not noticed it earlier. On Naruto's torso, he saw the telltale signs of a rash and wondered why Naruto had worn such a piece of clothing. He thought he knew the answer, and it only made his scowl deepen. "Naruto, why were you wearing such a sweater in this heat?" "Because I'm a bad person," he mumbled. "Naruto, listen to me. You are not a bad person. Do you understand?" He gazed up at the old man with such a bewildered expression that the Hokage had to swallow a painful lump in his throat. "But," Naruto protested feebly, trying to make sense of what the old man had told him. "I have to be a bad person. I'm special." He gasped suddenly. "Are you special too? Is that why you're talking to me?" His brightened face grew grim as he corrected himself. "No, you're not. You have friends." The Hokage blanched and squeezed his eyes shut in pain. When he reopened them, he carefully scrutinized the boy before him and saw that Naruto's eyes were glazed, and that his ribs were showing. "Naruto, when's the last time you ate anything? I want you to tell me truthfully." Naruto bit his lip, trying to think. That's when the dots appeared, and he began to blink rapidly. The next thing he knew was absolute nothingness. The Hokage rushed forward to catch Naruto in his arms, aware of what an answer that was. As he gently planted Naruto on the bed, he barked at Mama-san to feed him better and that if she ever tried to harm Naruto like that again, she would pay for it dearly. Mama-san nodded fearfully, but knew that nothing would change, at least in her demeanor toward the boy, and even the Hokage couldn't do a thing about it. Naruto felt strange as he slowly regained consciousness. He was shivering and yet things were poking him all over. When he opened his eyes, he found himself lying outside of the orphanage in the pouring rain. As he tried to sit up, he saw that leftover food was smeared all over his stomach, and could imagine that Mama-san had simply dumped it there. He had to admit that, even though it was soaked through, it was more than he had ever been given before, so he ate as much of it as he could. He didn't even know what it was, but his stomach was satisfied for the moment. That night, it rained unabated until the early hours of the morning. Humidity was still in the air, but the rain was cold and he was forced to endure it. The orphanage had been locked and he tried to huddle underneath the eaves of the building to escape the torrents, but it was a futile process. He still got drenched anyway. Despite this, though, he felt a strange sense of freedom outside of the building that had housed him since he could remember. He was no longer confined in those walls. Even though he was a bad person, suddenly the night seemed like it was his to own and cherish, and he stood to dance in the rain and celebrate. His elation was brief but enough to give him an idea. He wanted to explore all of Konoha. His first escapades into the village were memorable, to say the least. The first occurred the very next morning after he stole through a small window in the orphanage to grab a shirt. It was a hand-me-down, worn thing, but it effectively covered his abdomen and the weird marking there. After that was completed, he wandered into the center of Konoha. Due to the weather and early hour, there were barely any people to scoff at his presence, and the few who did not escape his notice. He had wondered if he was considered special everywhere, and at least now he knew the truth. He was indeed a bad person and would be treated as such no matter where he went. As he strolled down the length of Konoha, darting down side streets and gawking unabashedly at buildings, he couldn't help but feel happy. Even though he was special, bad people like him could still be happy, couldn't they? He watched in fascination as shops opened and he was allowed to stare momentarily into their windows. There were so many things he saw that he had never seen before, and all of them were interesting in their own right. He wished that he could try some of them out, but the cold glares of shopkeepers and even a woman's broom prevented him from entering nearly all of the shops. Still, this did not depress him. Even when he was literally kicked out of one of the places, the bruise only served to remind him what a wonderful and enlightening day this had been. He was indeed so enthralled that the insults and curses thrown in his direction bounced right off. His day was going very well until he opened his big, stupid mouth. Everything was so new and his curiosity was so piqued that he couldn't help it. There were these people walking through town that massively intrigued him. Everyone seemed to part in order to give them room, and they walked in this large group with something in the center which he knew was what they were trying to protect. What he didn't understand was how they could see when they didn't have eyes. All he could see was white and no pupil. It was very weird and he couldn't help but voice that aloud. Unfortunately, one of the men on the outside of the group heard him and whipped around to glare at him. Apparently he could see after all. "You," the man seethed. He grabbed him roughly and shook him. How dare you defile the Hyuga name, you despicable demon child. You should be taught your place. The man then began to kick him in the ribs. His only reaction to this was to curl into a ball. He felt himself be picked up and thrown again, then another foot connected and he was hurled into a small stand that smelled delicious. His back hit one of the bar stools sharply and he let out a whimper as another voice boomed out. What is the meaning of this? Leave this child alone. I would watch who you're defending, Tucci-san. This is the demon. Demon? All I see is a kid getting pummeled for no reason. Now leave my stand immediately or I'll report you to the Hokage. The other man scoffed but left, spitting curses. Are you okay? Came another voice, and he glanced up dazedly to see a very pretty girl with brown hair gazing down at him concernedly. He murmured through broken lips. He was glad that he was able to heal, for he knew that some of his ribs had been broken but were already being repaired. He didn't want to worry this nice girl and who he assumed her father anymore. He didn't want people to associate them with a bad person like him. My name is Ayame. Here, come sit down. Father, already on it. Say, boy, how would you like some ramen? He eyed the kind old man and blinked. In that instant he decided that he liked him, and the smells wafting around the place certainly helped. Even if he only got to taste a bit of whatever they were preparing for him, he knew he'd be happy. That's when he glanced over at another customer and saw him glaring in disgust. The man slapped some money on the counter and left, leaving his meal only partly finished. Suddenly, he felt very sick. I don't have any money so, he spoke feebly as the girl, Ayame, returned from the back and began to wipe off his face with a small cloth. Bah, no problem. Tucci waved dismissively. I'm just worried that you got hurt. Oh, I'm fine. I heal pretty fast so I'm fine, he stammered, not meeting their gazes. I don't have any money, he repeated. He had never really had any money ever, and even when he mysteriously got some one day, he was forced to pay one of the older children all of it just so he could use the bathroom. Don't worry about it. Here, enjoy. Oh, Tucci laughed as he went around and hoisted Naruto up so he was sitting on the counter. The bar stool had been too far away for the little boy that he was. He grew nervous up there but then a steaming bowl of food was brought before him. He sucked in a huge breath at the sumptuous amount. That's all, for me? He breathed. Yup, now eat up. Put some meat on those bones of yours. Ayame grinned. Itadakimasu, he cried out as he broke apart his chopsticks and dug in. It was the most delicious meal he had ever tasted. He learned a lot while meandering through Konoha, and there was one particular thing that was the most important: people. He learned which people were good, and which were bad. Most of the people he encountered were logged away into his mind as those who were cruel to him, but there were a select few who seemed to forgive his specialness. They didn't seem to mind that he was a bad person. The first two that made that list were Tucci and his daughter Ayame, whom he nicknamed Ramen Ojii-san and Ramen Oni-san. Whenever he stopped by, they had a warm meal ready for him and they even talked to him. They asked him questions, he answered, and then he asked them questions. He found that it was a very enjoyable experience to just talk to someone that didn't have hard eyes and even harder fists. He was also able to get a lot of questions answered, although he made sure not to ask the tough ones that even eluded him. He didn't know why he was a bad person, and he discovered that when he brought that up, Ramen Ojii-san and Ramen Oni-san got very sad. He hated to see them like that, so he kept his questions shallow from that point on and decided to only enjoy their wonderfully delicious charity. Of course, he also made sure to help out whenever they needed it. He had asked to have a job in order to pay them back, but Ramen Ojii-san shook his head and said that all was well. He still wanted to help, so he did when he could. A few others made that list as well. Once, when he got lost down one of the side streets, the man in the dog mask from before helped him. He decided to call him Inu-san, and was always happy when he caught him following. He wondered why Inu-san would want to trail him, but it was nice to know that he had someone there if he needed them. Then, of course, there was Scar-san. He first met him at Ichiraku's, and he was the first customer to not leave when he arrived. He didn't like to take away from their business, but Ramen Ojii-san and Ramen Oni-san insisted that he come to the front instead of sneaking around the back for food like some beggar. The man that he thus came to meet called himself Amino Iruka, although he always remembered him due to the scar that split his face. One day, he and Scar-san were eating when Scar-san spoke up. Naruto, how are you doing? Good. Naruto answered with a grin. He really had never been happier. Even these few people were enough to make him smile like he never had before. It especially helped that he had begun to formulate a list in his head of the people to avoid. It contained most of the town, and the no-eye people were highlighted very darkly, so he made sure to steer clear of them. With this list in his head, he was able to navigate through the village without too many problems. Hokage-sama has been worried about you lately, Scar-san continued. He's talked to Hisai-san at the orphanage and she says that she hasn't seen much of you. Where are you staying? The question was innocent enough, but it made Naruto squirm to know that he had been caught. The truth was that he had been sleeping under a bridge just so that he wouldn't have to go back to that awful place. It was still summer, so it wasn't like it got too cold during the night. Naruto, you can't continue to sleep under that bridge anymore, Scar-san continued, looking very serious. Naruto looked down, ashamed. But, he protested weakly, realizing that Inu-san must have tattled on him. Scar-san wore a sad expression. I understand that it might not be the most fun place to stay, but… No, Naruto interjected, I don't want to stay there. He glared at Scar-san and ran out of Ichiraku's. Blinded by tears, he didn't really see where he was going. He saw some stairs and ran up them. His pumping legs helped distract him from the millions of questions he had. Why was it that when he was finally happy, they were going to take it away from him? It was then that he had to remind himself that he was a bad person, a special person, so maybe he wasn't allowed to be happy. That must have been the reason. It didn't make him feel any better to think like that, though. Hey, this is my place. He jumped at the voice and looked around. He had gotten to the roof of a building, and he could see the whole of Konoha from it. It was an impressive view, but who had spoken? His eyes widened when he saw that a kid not much older than himself was reclining on a wooden platform. The kid had spiky black hair that reminded him of a pineapple. What are you doing here? The kid asked as he propped himself up on his elbows to get a better look at him. Naruto hung his head. I'm sorry, he murmured. For what? The kid laughed. I was just kidding. This is my special place to look at the sky, but it's not like it's mine. I don't own this whole building. Naruto glanced up and peered at this strange kid, hurriedly wiping his nose and eyes. What's your name? I'm Nara Shikamaru. I haven't seen you around here. What was that name some people called him? I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto, huh? Where you from? Konoha, Naruto said immediately. Shikamaru sighed wearily. I gathered that, but I thought I would have seen you somewhere by now. Oh well, I've just started coming to town, Naruto explained, standing rigidly. He was surprised that this Shikamaru didn't seem to know that he was talking to a bad person. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow at him. I'm not gonna bite you, no. Come sit over here. You can join me in indulging a passion of mine. Naruto stared at him. What? Just come over here. Are you sure? Yeah, why not? You don't bite, do you? Shikamaru asked, fixing him a curious expression. Naruto giggled. No, I don't. He jogged over to where Shikamaru was relaxing and sat on the edge of the wooden stage. What you doing? I like watching the clouds. You still didn't answer my question, by the way, Shikamaru pointed out snidely. Clouds? Isn't that kind of boring? Shikamaru scoffed. First you ignore me, then you insult my favorite pastime. Naruto sniffed and stood up. I'm sorry. I'll go. What? Nah, I'm just joking. Lighten up, Naruto. I'm just curious. I usually remember all the faces I see and I haven't ever seen yours. Naruto sat back down a little hesitantly and decided to answer honestly. I used to live in the orphanage on the edge of town. Used to? I don't live there anymore, Naruto added, avoiding Shikamaru's questioning gaze as if fearing that everything would be exposed. So where do you live now? Somewhere, Naruto said defensively. Shikamaru hummed thoughtfully before changing the subject. Must be hard being an orphan. My parents annoy me a lot, but not having them at all would be awful. Oh, sorry. He cast a sheepish look in Naruto's direction. My mom says I have a talent of sticking my foot in my mouth, so don't take what I say too personally. Naruto eyed him strangely. You stick your foot in your mouth? He repeated incredulously. Shikamaru rolled his eyes. Never mind. Just lay back and look at the clouds. Today's a great day to do that. Naruto obeyed and watched as the clouds began to slowly drift by overhead. Look, Shikamaru cried suddenly, pointing. That one looks like a dog lying down, doesn't it? Naruto followed his gaze and squinted fiercely. Looks more to me like a cup of ramen fell over and noodles are spilling out. What? Shikamaru said laughingly. Shikamaru turned to Naruto only to see that the blonde had become shame-faced. Shikamaru returned his gaze to the sky. Yeah, I guess it does look like that, he agreed, grinning as Naruto cracked a small smile. The next day, Naruto arrived at Ichiraku's just as it was opening with a huge grin on his face. Ramen Ojii-san laughed as Naruto related the events leading up to meeting Shikamaru. He jumped all over the place, waving his arms dramatically, as he exclaimed that Shikamaru asked if they could meet again the next day. I take it you're going to go see him, then? Tucci chuckled as Naruto nodded so vigorously that his head threatened to fly off. He was glad that Naruto had finally found someone his own age to play with that wouldn't cast him aside like so many of the others had been told to do. Is Scar-san coming? Naruto piped up, fidgeting on the bar stool as he reached up to the counter. You mean Iruka-san? Ayame corrected him automatically. Naruto's face clouded slightly, but his smile remained intact. Yeah, Iruka-san. Is he coming? I can't say, Tucci spoke up. We did just open up. Do you realize what time it is? I know, I was just too excited. Naruto exclaimed happily. His expression darkened as his grin faded. I suppose he's mad at me for running out yesterday. He's just worried about you, Ayame said. You want your usual for breakfast? He sighed. I want to pay for it, but don't worry. Iruka talked to us and the Hokage is compensating us for your meals. We just need to fill you with more than ramen, young man. You need to grow up big and strong, after all, Tucci said. Naruto looked relieved after that. But what is there besides ramen? What is there besides ramen? A lot of things. Tucci laughed. Here, let me show you something. Naruto watched with wide eyes as Tucci cracked some eggs into a rectangular pan and began to cook it. When it started to set, he rolled it up and then added another layer, rolling them into each other until he was satisfied. Then, carefully topping it with fish paste and soy sauce, he handed it to Naruto with a grin. You're the best cook ever. Naruto exclaimed upon taking a bite of what Tucci called tamagoyaki. Tucci just laughed. After Naruto finished his breakfast and thanked Ramen Ojii-san and Ramen Oni-san, he stood up to leave, suddenly nervous about meeting Shikamaru. Had yesterday just been a fluke? Did Shikamaru really want to play with him as he had said? No one had ever wanted to before because they knew he was bad. Maybe he should tell Shikamaru? He didn't want him to get hurt. In all honesty, as excited as he was, this same doubt had kept him awake for most of the night. Naruto, you okay? Tucci asked, noticing his sudden crestfallenness. Yeah, I guess. Well then, go have fun with your friend. He was just about to turn and leave when that word made him freeze in place. Friend? He repeated fearfully, pivoting to lock gazes with the old man. Yeah, that kid, what's his name? Shikamaru, Tucci clarified, nodding. Naruto stared at him fully with unabashed shock. He could be my friend, he breathed. Really? He dared think it was possible. He wasn't allowed to be happy, to have friends. But would Shikamaru feel the same way? Of course. Now go run along. Tucci encouraged, smiling reassuredly. Naruto's eyes sparkled as he pumped a fist in the air. Yeah, okay, bye, he called over his shoulder as he raced out of Ichiraku's. Tucci watched him go and sadly shook his head, praying that this Shikamaru wouldn't reject Naruto. Naruto had such fragile trust in people, and he feared the poor boy would break if Shikamaru did even the tiniest thing wrong. Tucci's worries were for naught, though, as Naruto enjoyed the best day in his life. Shikamaru was a really fun and cool person, as Naruto quickly discovered. After meeting in the same location as the previous day, Shikamaru commenced showing Naruto other favorite spots of his to cloud gaze. Naruto had to admit that he was rather relieved that these places were obscure and off the beaten path, since he didn't know how Shikamaru would react to his usual treatment by the townspeople. He was still afraid that Shikamaru wouldn't want to play with him after learning that he was a bad person, but luckily that issue did not come up. Together, they explored the remotest areas of Konoha and ended up on a grassy knoll on the outskirts of town. It was a private sanctuary where both boys simply lazed around in silence. Naruto was mostly pleased by this activity not only because Shikamaru didn't ask any more demanding, personal questions but also because he had never shared camaraderie with anyone his age before, and it was a novel experience. After a little while, they got hungry and Shikamaru shared with him a bento his mother had packed. Shikamaru complained and grimaced as he removed some very feline onigiri, but Naruto just thought they were cute. At that comment, Shikamaru scoffed and told Naruto that maybe he was lucky he didn't have a mom because his was the worst at embarrassing her only son. Have you ever gotten something on your face but didn't know it, and you were just walking around looking dumb? Well, that's happened to me, but 100 times worse since my mom always notices, takes out a handkerchief, spits on it and wipes it off my face. In front of everyone, Shikamaru exclaimed, I am almost 7 years old. I think I can take care of that myself. But she's just so annoying. Naruto was thoughtful. That was kind of nice of her, though, he mused aloud before ducking his head in embarrassment. Shikamaru frowned at him and then shrugged. Yeah, I guess, he consented. The next few days passed much in the same way, although Naruto never had more fun before in his life. He wondered if maybe he and Shikamaru were becoming friends. Even though he wanted desperately to believe that, it was growing more and more difficult since he knew that eventually, Shikamaru would realize that he was a bad person and then it would be up to him whether to join the good list or the bad. Naruto really hoped that Shikamaru wouldn't end up on the list of people he had to avoid, because just the thought of that made his heart ache. Unfortunately, he couldn't completely rule out that possibility, no matter how badly he desired otherwise. Later that week, Shikamaru led Naruto to a spot where another boy stood. Proudly, Shikamaru went and clapped a hand on the chubby boy's shoulder. Naruto, this here is my friend Akamichi Choji. He and his family just got back from vacation. His father and my father go way back. Naruto put a smile on his face but inside felt like crying. So he had just been a replacement. He felt like he had gotten kicked in the gut. He faltered, wondering if he should introduce himself accurately this time as demon or monster. When he glanced up, though, he saw that Choji looked nervous and shy too. Nice to meet you, he corrected himself as he smiled at the other boy. Choji awkwardly grinned back, and held out a bag of something which he offered to Naruto. Want some potato chips? Naruto blinked. Potato chips? What are those? He wondered if he had said something wrong when Choji's eyes began to blaze fiercely. You've never had potato chips before? Choji demanded, all traces of his previous demeanor forgotten in his outrage. That's crazy. You don't know what you're missing. Really? Naruto whispered, slightly taken aback. He glanced fearfully at Shikamaru, but the spiky-haired boy was muffling laughter behind his hand. Naruto calmed slightly and asked if he could try a potato chip. As he crunched into his first one, he let the taste fill his mouth and he exclaimed that they were delicious. After that, Choji settled down and the three of them went off to play together. That night, as Naruto returned to the underside of his bridge, he thought of all the wonderful things he had done with his friends. Were they his friends? His heart said yes, and that was enough for him to be happy for the rest of his life, even if he was sleeping in the dirt and eating only one meal a day. Naruto had seen his effect on Ichiraku's customers and knew that Ramen Ojii-san was losing money thanks to him, so he forced himself to a limit of one Ichiraku's meal a day. Any other food he found would complement this diet, whether it was snacks from Shikamaru or Choji or things he foraged for on his own. While this was certainly more food than he was used to, and of course far better company, he was still hungry at times. The only bad thing was that he had to avoid Scar-san. It was hard because Naruto liked him a lot, and he had so few people that actually accepted him. It was just that he didn't want to go back to the orphanage. He really didn't mind this bridge or sleeping outdoors, and he could deal with the chill. He had suffered worse elsewhere. Thinking about Scar-san made Naruto him that he had skipped out on dinner at Ichiraku's because he had seen him there. His stomach also reminded him as it growled menacingly. Rummaging through a small bag he had found, he pulled out some mushrooms he had picked. They looked delicious, and without any hesitation, he stuffed them in his mouth. He grimaced. They may have looked delicious, but they tasted disgusting. It was even hard to swallow. Still, it was food, so he finished what he had and settled down for a good night's sleep. Naruto was awakened in the middle of the night by a severe pain in his stomach, followed by an urge to vomit. He leapt out of the bridge and retched, puking up his previous meal. Even when his dry heaves faded, he still felt awful. His head ached and he felt abruptly dizzy. He crawled back into his spot and tried to fall back asleep, but the nausea and headache continued, allowing him no respite. By the time the sun came up, he was in even worse condition. He could barely process anything beside the muscle spasms and cramps that ripped through his body. Something was wrong and he was scared, so he forced himself to lurch to his feet and stagger into town. He could barely see where he was going and stumbled often, trying to make his way to Ichiraku's since they had been able to help him before. Of course, what worried him most was that he had never been this sick before. Usually he had healed. What was going on? He had barely made it into the town limits before a stitch cut through him and he collapsed to the ground, trembling in agony. Pain erupted in his stomach and he clutched it desperately as his body began to shake of its own accord. Naruto shuddered and whimpered as people glanced at him and kept going. Would no one stop? Wait, of course they wouldn't. They thought it would be better to let a bad person die, for surely this is what was happening. Naruto clenched his fists and began to cry, thinking over his recently found happiness and wishing that he had gotten more of a chance to enjoy it. But maybe it was better this way, better for him to die. He vaguely wondered if his treasured people would miss him before a violent seizure overcame him and he saw nothing more. The first thing he was aware of was his desperate desire to purge his stomach. Beneath him was soft and he sensed a presence beside him. Unfortunately, he couldn't ponder on this for long since his body demanded release. He sat up blindly, wincing as he turned and vomited into a seemingly projected bucket. A person came over behind him and rubbed his back gently. At this, Naruto blearily opened his eyes and leaned back. "Who?" he breathed, blinking to regain focus. "How are you feeling?" He knew that voice, and although he was happy to hear it, his belly also squirmed. "Scar-san? I told you to call me Iruka," Iruka corrected teasingly as he eased Naruto back into some pillows. "Now what's going on? I was making some early rounds this morning and I found you lying on the side of the road, unconscious." The worry in his voice was evident, and Naruto couldn't help but feel warm at that. "I don't know. I got sick last night." "What is this place?" "This is my apartment," Iruka explained. "You seem to be doing better and I figured you'd rather avoid the hospital." Naruto grinned. "Yeah, I feel lots better." Iruka let out a relieved breath. "That's good. You were pretty pale. Why did you pass out?" Naruto scrunched up his face as he tried to remember. "Well, I ate some mushrooms." "Mushrooms?" Iruka repeated in astonishment. "Naruto." He seemed to want to lecture about something but realized that he couldn't in this case. Instead, he sighed. "This is what the Hokage and I are worried about. You can't keep living on your own. What would have happened to you if I hadn't found you?" "I would have gotten better," he mumbled unhappily. Iruka stared at Naruto, frowning. "Naruto, you know better than me that there are people that could have hurt you when you were like that, and you wouldn't have been able to defend yourself. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if something happened to you." Naruto hung his head ashamedly. "I wish that I could make you see that this is for the best," Iruka continued softly. "You have to go back to the orphanage. It's the safest place for you." "Safest place?" Naruto exploded suddenly. "But Mama-san hurts me and locks me up and never feeds me and I'm happier outside under my bridge." Iruka was stunned as Naruto began to sniffle. "Mama-san hates me, everyone hates me. Why am I such a bad person?" he whispered, hugging himself. Suddenly, he was engulfed in a massive hug by stronger, warmer arms. "Naruto, you could never be a bad person. You don't deserve any of their hatred. They are just ignorant people who want something to blame. It's not your fault and it will never be your fault. Do you understand me? I don't want you to think like that ever again." Naruto turned and buried himself in Iruka's chest, sobbing brokenly. Iruka held him tightly and didn't let go until Naruto himself gently pulled away. He stared up at Iruka and saw reflected in the older man's eyes his own pain. "Why am I different?" he asked timidly, pleadingly. Iruka swallowed thickly. "I wish I could tell you, but per the Hokage's orders, anyone that reveals that will not be allowed to live much longer." He prayed that Naruto wouldn't take that news in the wrong way. Naruto looked thoughtful. "So, not everyone knows?" Iruka nodded. "And you know?" Naruto continued. Again, Iruka nodded and held his breath. Naruto sighed and then cracked a small smile. "Must be pretty important." Iruka chuckled. "Yes, you are very important." Naruto rolled his eyes, or at least tried to. He couldn't quite imitate Shikamaru perfectly yet. "That's not what I meant." Iruka ignored his petulance and raised his hand to ruffle Naruto's hair affectionately. His heart seized when the boy winced despite himself. His mind began to turn and he froze when a thought occurred to him. Naruto, would you mind waiting here? I need to go talk to the Hokage for a moment. Okay, Naruto agreed obediently. He watched Iruka's back as the Chunin stepped out of the bedroom and disappeared around the corner. Hopefully this won't take too long. Feel free to look around while I'm gone. Iruka called out from an unknown location as the sound of a door closing echoed out moments later. Naruto sat on the bed for a moment and decided that he wanted to roll in the blankets. It had been a while since he had slept on real bed. Actually, had he ever slept on a real bed? Iruka's huge, double-sized one felt amazingly comfortable and despite his curiosity, sleep tugged at his eyelids. A few hours later, Naruto woke up upon hearing his name. He sat up and rubbed his eyes blearily. Naruto, I have great news. Iruka sat upon the bed and eyed Naruto anxiously. Well, I guess I should ask you first. This is a bit random, and I'm not sure if I can do it. I mean, I barely make enough money to support myself but… Anyway, I was wondering if you'd like to live with me. Throughout Iruka's fragmented speech, Naruto had stared at him, utterly perplexed and still drowsy from sleep. By the end, though, he was wide awake and his mouth was wide open. You mean? He breathed in wonder. At first, he was gripped by elation and wanted to cheer to the world. But then reality set in and his shoulders slumped as he shook his head. I can't, he choked out. Iruka swallowed, his jaw tight. I know, it was too forward of me. I'm sorry. No, I want to live with you but… Naruto jumped in, trying to explain himself. Before he could stop himself, he blurted, I just don't want you to become bad too. He hid his face as Iruka inhaled a sharp breath. After a few moments, the Chunin spoke up, his voice full of emotion. I thought I told you to never think like that again. Naruto huddled deeper into himself. But I want you to know that I don't care. We'll be bad together if that's what it takes. Naruto glanced up, his eyes shining. But, no buts. Iruka interrupted sternly. Although his voice was cold, his eyes sparkled. Naruto blinked up at him. Is this a dream? He asked in the quietest of voices. Iruka smiled warmly. No, but I know a place whose food brings you close to one. I'll treat you at Ichiraku's. Wanna come? Naruto nodded vigorously and bounded after him. Thanks for the meal, Ramen Ojii-san. Naruto called over his shoulder as he and Iruka left Ichiraku's. Naruto was in the highest possible spirits, and as a result, was practically skipping as he and Iruka wandered downtown. Iruka had promised to buy Naruto some new clothes, and knew a place that would most likely allow his entry. It turned out that his suspicions were correct and as Naruto left the shop, he was decked out in some tan shorts and a green shirt that actually fit him. He did miss Iruka's old shirt though, which Iruka had let him borrow since his previous one could barely be considered clothing. Hey, Scar Saw. I mean, Iruka-san? Yes? Can we stop somewhere really quick? Sure, lead the way. As Naruto and Iruka made their way through town, Naruto couldn't help but notice the additional glares people were sending in Iruka's direction. It made his heart clench painfully, but he knew that Iruka was stubborn and wouldn't change his mind. Naruto had already tried again, feebly though, since he was really looking forward to this new living arrangement. Naruto? They had stopped near a bridge on the outskirts of town, and Iruka had a frown on his face. I just wanted to pick up some things I forgot to grab, Naruto explained as he disappeared underneath the bridge and emerged carrying what looked like a used potato chip bag, a rock, a dirty cloth and some old chopsticks. What are these things? Iruka asked, curiously eyeing what appeared to be trash. These are good memories, Naruto said. This is when I met Choji, the rock I found the day I met Shikamaru. This cloth is from Ramen Oni-chan when I first ate there, and then these chopsticks, they were from the first meal I had with you. Iruka swallowed a lump in his throat as he carefully embraced the younger boy who tried really hard not to flinch away. Sorry, Naruto apologized, seeing the expression on Iruka's face. What are you apologizing for? These are lovely keepsakes. You can put them on the shelf when we get home, Iruka told him, causing Naruto to smile at the use of pronouns and the fact that he now had a home. What an amazing concept that was. Still, he grew slightly disheartened when the villagers set their hatred on Iruka as they marched through Konoha, hand in hand. Naruto resolved that he had to do something to make up for Iruka's kindness, but what? That indeed was the question. When they got back to Iruka's apartment, Iruka asked him what his plans were for the day. Naruto wanted to stay with Iruka despite his playdate with Choji and Shikamaru, and voiced this aloud. "Do you want me to help you send a message to them explaining your situation?" "Here, we can write it together," Iruka offered, setting out a piece of parchment. Naruto stared at his feet. "I can't write," he confessed. Iruka sighed. "I figured as much. Can you read?" Naruto shook his head. "Mama-san only taught the others." "There's got to be a way to get rid of that woman," Iruka growled. "Mayuko-san was so much nicer when I was there." Naruto gasped. "You lived at the orphanage? Oh, you didn't know?" "I suppose not. Yes, my parents died when I was 11. I didn't stay at the orphanage long, but I did live there until I got this apartment on my own." Naruto watched Iruka intently, initially unsure how to feel. Iruka gave Naruto a reassuring smile, and in that moment, as Naruto stared up into his eyes, he suddenly felt like he had found someone who understood him, understood his loneliness, his pain. And now, despite what Iruka had gone through, he was offering his home to help someone like him, a boy who was bad. It made tears brim in Naruto's eyes, which he quickly swiped away before Iruka noticed. Iruka was risking so much for him, how could he possibly repay him? The answer came abruptly, and although he wouldn't be able to do it until the next day, it still made him smile to himself. As he tucked away these thoughts, he only hoped it would be enough. "Cool place," Choji said around his mouthful of potato chips. After hearing that Naruto was hanging out at his new home, his two friends decided to drop by later that day and check it out for themselves. "Yeah, this is pretty nice," Shikamaru agreed, eyeing the large bookshelf in the living room. "I like your new clothes, too," Choji added. "They look good on you." "I'm always outgrowing mine," he grimaced. Naruto blushed. "Thanks. I like your clothes too, though. They fit you well." "For now," Choji grumbled. "You know your mom loves buying you new clothes." Shikamaru interjected, laughing, as he clapped his older friend on the back. Choji murmured with a grin. "I love the way new clothes feel too," he cried passionately. Shikamaru and Naruto stared at Choji, exchanged looks with each other as the chubby boy bit his lip nervously, and promptly burst out laughing. The boys continued their investigation and then bid Naruto farewell, promising to meet up the next day. Naruto then spent the rest of the day relaxing with Iruka. He asked the older man questions and explored the apartment again and again, fixating on even the smallest of details. He wanted to know every inch of his new home. The apartment wasn't very large. It had only one bedroom, one bathroom, a living room and a small kitchen. Still, it was cozy and Naruto couldn't have imagined anything better. That night, Iruka and Naruto climbed into bed. Naruto snuggled into the blankets and languished in the soft pillow beneath his head. "Here, Naruto. I want to read you a story." Iruka's voice became expressive as he recited the tale in the book on his lap. Naruto listened intently at first, and then his eyelids began to droop. Suddenly, Iruka's voice faded away altogether into pleasant dreams. The next few weeks were the happiest Naruto had ever experienced in his short lifetime. He had friends, a home and a wonderful man taking care of him. He was well fed, well clothed and squeaky clean. Naruto could barely believe how quickly his life had changed. The way he lived before was long gone from his mind, and he was so grateful that he never dwelled upon his past. His life was positive now, why should he focus on negatives? Unfortunately, not everything was perfect. Naruto still knew that, no matter what Iruka or anyone else told him, something about him was bad. Why else would the villagers treat him so cruelly at times? While he decided it was best to not puzzle over this, he still wanted answers. He figured that Iruka and the others who were kind to him were simply so kind that they ignored his terrible flaws. He thought it was very nice of them to do such a thing, so he focused on making them not regret their decision. Every day, he played with Shikamaru and Choji. As Naruto feared, they did venture more into town and, unfortunately, as a result, Shikamaru and Choji were able to witness firsthand the treatment Naruto received. While Naruto steadfastly maintained his blasé facade, he knew they were worried about him, so he tried his best to smile it off and encourage them to concentrate on their game. Although this tactic succeeded, it got harder and harder to convince Shikamaru and Choji that the villagers' scorn was unimportant. Each time something happened, he could see the questions surface in his friends' minds. He wished he could respond to them, but he didn't even know the answers himself. Naruto knew it was just a matter of time before they decided that apathy was no longer a solution and would confront him about their concerns. Naruto mentally prepared himself for such a day even as he tried to remain positive in the present. For Iruka, the man who had gone above and beyond to help him, Naruto did all he could. Despite his small size, he was determined. Unfortunately, this determination proved too strong sometimes. Once, while he was washing the dishes, a wet bowl slipped out of his hands and crashed onto the floor. Naruto panicked instinctively and instead of cleaning up the mess, ran into the corner of the bedroom and sat there, waiting for Iruka to come home and punish him. When Iruka did return, he immediately understood the situation and rushed to reassure him that he was not going to be punished. He even went so far as to take out another bowl and intentionally drop it to prove that bowls didn't matter. This eventually caused Naruto to relax, and it ended with the two of them breaking the rest of the bowls in the small apartment and having to eat their dinner in cups. On another occasion, Naruto tried to do the laundry and accidentally turned some of Iruka's white shirts pink. To prove that he wasn't mad, Iruka stubbornly wore one to work and endured teasing all day long. Despite the abuse, he decided it was worth it to see Naruto's unabashed smile light up his entire face. In return for Iruka's endless kindness, Naruto did any chore possible and above all, made sure to be home when Iruka got back from work so he could welcome him back with "Okari." He loved that time of day most because, no matter how tired Iruka was, he would wipe the exhaustion off his face to grin broadly and pull Naruto into a tight hug. Then, he would ruffle Naruto's hair affectionately and Naruto would giggle happily. Sometimes at night before falling asleep to Iruka's pleasant reading voice, Naruto would wonder if this was what it was like to have a father. The thought always made him feel all bubbly inside. Unfortunately one day, this happy bubble abruptly burst. Naruto was out playing with Shikamaru and Choji. They were wandering down the main street of Konoha when Choji spotted his favorite sweets shop. Unable to resist, he immediately made a beeline for it, followed by a reluctant Shikamaru. Naruto, though, drew up short. I'll wait out here, he said, staring at his feet. Why? Choji asked as Shikamaru peered questioningly at Naruto. I'm not allowed to go in there, he admitted miserably. What? Why not? Choji persisted, growing angry now that food was involved. I don't know. You guys can go in without me, he insisted pleadingly, glancing up at Shikamaru and Choji with an encouraging expression. Shikamaru frowned, seeing right through him. Naruto, go ahead. Really, I'm fine. Shikamaru exchanged worried glances with Choji and sighed. Alright, we'll be right back. Well, we'll try to be, but Choji takes forever to choose what he wants. I can't help it, Choji huffed. Everything is just so good. Naruto laughed unconvincingly as Shikamaru and Choji reluctantly entered the shop. As Choji went crazy looking and drooling at everything, Shikamaru puzzled over Naruto's strange behavior. He suspected that there was some secret involving Naruto, but it seemed that even Naruto wasn't sure what it was. It was rather troublesome that so many others appeared to know the truth but weren't sharing it with them, most likely because they were seemingly too young to understand. Shikamaru hated that. He wasn't that young and he despised getting babied. It was so annoying, especially since even after asking his parents he had learned nothing except that it was a very important secret, which, if revealed, was punishable by death. Of course, what did the truth really entail? What could possibly make a kid like Naruto deserve all the scorn he received and all the austere secrecy surrounding him? Shikamaru had known Naruto for a little while now, and even he had judged Naruto completely innocent and undeserving of such cruelty. In fact, it was downright wrong. Naruto was just a kid struggling to survive in a harsh world. It was bad enough that he didn't have parents, but to also be harassed everywhere he went? It was no wonder that he had such little confidence and clung so fiercely and desperately to the few that were kind to him. Shikamaru had to admit that, even though Naruto was annoying sometimes, he really liked him and was really glad that he was his friend. He found himself wanting to make Naruto smile. He wanted Naruto to gain courage, and most of all, he wanted him to be happy. After hearing of Naruto's new living situation, he had appraised Iruka carefully to make sure the man wouldn't hurt Naruto, and had approved of him after some serious interrogation. If it didn't work out, Shikamaru would have something serious to say about it. Shikamaru was abruptly startled out of his thoughts when he heard scuffling sounds coming from the street. Then there came some yelling and mocking laughter, followed by thumps. "What's that?" Choji asked Shikamaru, approaching him with a frown. Shikamaru's eyes widened. No. He raced forward, desperate to prove his suspicions wrong, but it was too late. Outside on the street, a tiny greenish ball was getting kicked around and jeered at by some older teenagers. Blood had already splattered on the streets, and Shikamaru could hear gasping and whimpering coming from the object of their cruelty. "Monster! Demon!" One of the bullies cursed, landing a savage blow on the huddled ball, which cried out momentarily before hugging itself tighter. "He can't even fight back," laughed another. "He's too scared and weak. Hey, unroll it so we can hit it in the face again." "Leave him alone," Shikamaru yelled as he broke through the huddle and stood in front of Naruto's trembling and bloodied form. "Yeah, go away," Choji stammered fearfully as he came to stand beside Shikamaru. Both boys glared at the teenagers, daring them to try anything else. "Go away," one of them mimicked cruelly. "Who are you, the little demon's bodyguards?" Another one sneered. "Get out of the way. I'm not done paying that monster back for what it did." "I'm not moving," Shikamaru declared defiantly, stamping down a foot to emphasize his statement. "You little bastard," Shikamaru grunted as one of the bullies slapped him hard across the face, sending him reeling to the ground. "Shikamaru, are you okay?" came a weak, quivering voice. "Naruto." Choji exhaled in surprise as the younger boy shakily rose to his feet. Naruto's eyes were black and swollen and his face was red and puffy from where he had been hit. Bruises covered him all over, and blood dripped from his cracked and broken lips. Despite having been severely beaten, he firmly stood his ground. Don't hurt them. Hurt me," he pleaded before wincing in pain and clutching desperately at his aching stomach. "Naruto," Choji cried out as ran over to support his friend, but he was abruptly stopped by a look. No. Go. I don't want you to get hurt." "Naruto." Tears began to run down Choji's face as he stubbornly shook his head. "You're hurt and I'm not leaving you." By this time, Shikamaru was back on his feet. Although his cheeks stung, Naruto was in much worse condition. Naruto turned to him. Shikamaru, are you okay?" "Course I'm okay," Shikamaru muttered dismissively, glaring at Naruto's attackers who were cruelly mimicking them. The leader laughed. "Ah, isn't it cute that the freak has friends? Maybe we should teach them a lesson for defending a demon like it." The three boys braced themselves for an assault before a large voice boomed out. "What's going on here, father?" Choji sniffled in relief. Choza shouldered through the group, sweeping his eyes over the scene and understanding what he needed to know. His gaze rested longest on Naruto, who was swaying where he stood. "I think you'd better leave," he threatened in a low voice as the bullies, taking in his size, backed away and ran off with their tails between their legs. As soon as the immediate danger was over, Naruto crumpled to the ground and lay still. Choji anxiously ran over and sank beside him, tears spilling from his eyes at seeing Naruto in such a way. "Father, please help him," he sobbed. Choza knew about Naruto's situation, of course, although he had mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, he wasn't a heartless man, and he did have a son Naruto's age, so he couldn't help but sympathize with the boy. On the other hand, though, he had to think of his image in the eyes of the village, and not wanting to upset his clan, decided that the safest course of action would be to practice indifference. Normally he would neither go out of his way to be cruel to boy, nor actively be kind to him. His behavior would only change if he caught others treating the boy badly. In recent weeks, however, Choza had had to sort out an interesting dilemma. When his precious son came home with excited news about making a new friend, Choza was thrilled. That is, until he learned that Choji's new friend was Uzumaki Naruto. His thoughts swirled darkly at first, but then he began to notice how his previously introverted son began to smile and laugh more. Choza realized that this could only be due to his friends, and he couldn't help but feel grateful. Now, seeing such a small boy like Naruto reduced to such a state, Choza felt his heart clench, and his son's tears stabbed him through the gut. With a nod, he reached down and picked up Naruto in his arms, feeling how thin the boy was. Wordlessly, he carried Naruto through Konoha and back to his home, Shikamaru and Choji somberly trailing behind him. Something wet was on his head. It felt so good for a moment that Naruto just let it drag across his forehead and drip down his hot cheeks. Suddenly, he grew alarmed at the memories that abruptly assaulted him. He sat bolt upright in bed, gasping, as the woman who had been attending to him yelped in surprise. "Oh, you scared me," she cried as she backed away slightly. Naruto eyed her in horror, noting her large size. She could hurt him. "Naruto, you're finally awake." He whipped his head around to his side where Shikamaru and Choji appeared. "Are you okay?" the chubby boy asked tentatively. Naruto blinked and nodded slowly. "Looks like it's true that you heal fast," Shikamaru remarked wryly before his face grew clouded. "You definitely didn't look so good before." "I'm sorry," Naruto said automatically, recalling that Shikamaru had been hit. Shikamaru stared at Naruto. "What?" Naruto hung his head. "I'm sorry you got hurt because of me. I understand if you don't want to be friends anymore." "Naruto!" Shikamaru yelled angrily, causing Naruto to glance up fearfully. "Why would I not want to be friends with you?" In frustration, he slammed his fist into the wall. "I should be the one apologizing to you and asking your forgiveness. We're friends. We're supposed to protect each other and I let you get hurt. You should be the one who doesn't want to be friends with me." Naruto gaped at Shikamaru in astonishment. Before he could even speak, Choji cut in. "That goes the same for me," he declared, trying to put a serious expression onto his face. Naruto blinked in absolute confusion. But, looks like you have two very loyal friends, Naruto." The blonde looked up and up into the eyes of a very large man who was smiling proudly at him. "Naruto, this is my father and mother," Choji introduced. "You poor boy," Choji's mother, Chiharu, said with a worried look. "How can people be so awful? Besides, look how skinny you are. You're just skin and bones. You know, I'm going to go make you something to eat." Before Naruto could open his mouth to protest, she disappeared around the corner. "That's my mother for you," Choji explained laughingly. "And she makes the best food," Shikamaru added. "So, Naruto, would you like to stay for lunch?" Choza invited from the doorway. Although, he admitted, grinning widely just like his son, "I don't think you really have a choice." Naruto managed a small smile. "Okay, you won't regret it," Shikamaru chuckled. "Come on, I want to show you around before we eat." Choji exclaimed, leaping forward as his father got out of the way to let them through. Naruto gently slid out of the bed and followed the very eager Choji. Shikamaru joined him. Naruto glanced sideways at him. "Are you sure you're all right?" he insisted. Shikamaru nodded. "Yeah, it was nothing." At this, Naruto visibly exhaled in relief, and as they exited the bedroom, Shikamaru draped an arm around Naruto's shoulders. He was a little saddened at the tension he felt there due to such unaccustomed human contact, but then Naruto relaxed, and Shikamaru vowed with all of his being to never let him get hurt again. He would do everything in his power to keep the smile on his friend's face. Naruto had never experienced so many ups in his life. Usually, he had a lot of downs that overwhelmed his ups, but now it appeared that the opposite was in effect. Had the world suddenly gone backwards? Despite his sickness and then getting beaten up in front of Choji and Shikamaru, Naruto was beyond happy. He existed in a cloud of joy that hovered about him always, allowing him to ignore the glares sent at him, or the rude insults aimed with precision. Even though bad things had happened, good things seemed to have resulted. For one, Choji and Shikamaru were still his friends, and now even the Akamichi family was on his side when they traveled through town together. Naruto had never had so many allies before, and it made him so happy just to think about it that he couldn't stop smiling. Naruto couldn't believe how lucky he was. Not only were his precious people growing in number, but they were also utterly disregarding the fact that he was bad. Ever since the incident, he had feared that people would abandon him. What clearer example was there that he was bad? His precious people might have ignored that fact before, but after getting beaten up in public right in front of their eyes, surely they would recognize their mistake at calling him their friend. How shocked he had been when their reactions completely contradicted his expectations. In fact, instead of admitting their error and leaving him behind, their support for him only became fiercer and more protective. It made a lump grow in his throat and tears form in his eyes. He didn't deserve this kind treatment. Or did he? Suddenly, Naruto didn't know what to believe. Was he really bad? If so many people were willing to support him, then he couldn't be bad, right? For surely his precious people were not so easily corrupted by evil. He could never believe that they were bad. Still, even though he was surrounded by joy, nagging doubts attacked him at his most vulnerable moments. Until the secret was revealed, he would never really know if he was bad or not. A few weeks after befriending the Akamichis, Naruto and Iruka were invited to dinner by the Nara family. Naruto was a little annoyed that Iruka insisted on dressing up for the occasion, meaning that Naruto had to get scrubbed clean and wear nicer clothes that itched him. "I've been there before just after me." Shikamaru and Choji rolled in the dirt, and it was fine. Naruto complained, pouting as Iruka tried to comb his unruly blonde hair. "Well, this is a special occasion," Iruka tutted as Naruto tried to wriggle away. "Not so fast. We've got to straighten your robes." "But it's too tight," Naruto whined. Iruka fixed him a look and Naruto complacently stared at his feet while Iruka fixed his attire. "There, now don't we look like two fine, presentable gentlemen?" Naruto stared at his reflection in the mirror and grimaced. "I don't even look like me anymore," he said crossly before turning to Iruka. "And you look like a fish with all those colors." Iruka pretended to be offended and then ducked down to touzle Naruto's hair. "Oh yeah?" he challenged. "Well, you look like a little lion cub. You dressed me up like this," Naruto accused as his hair began to stick up again. Iruka laughed. "Alright, we'd best leave before our outfits get any worse." When they arrived at the Nara household, Shikamaru greeted them at the door. Naruto had to stop himself from laughing out loud at the ridiculous mess that was Shikamaru's hair. Apparently, someone had decided that it wasn't tame enough and had tried in vain to flatten it. Unfortunately, the pineapple shape was resisting, creating an interesting look that matched Shikamaru's dark smirk. "Go ahead and laugh, but it looks like you received the same treatment," he muttered grimly. Although his voice was critical, Naruto recognized the sympathy in Shikamaru's eyes, and the boys exchanged quick looks of understanding. Suddenly, a woman appeared behind him with her hands on her hips. "Shikamaru, I told you to stop complaining. Now stop slouching and let our guests inside." Shikamaru rolled his eyes as Iruka attempted to muffle a snort. Naruto and Iruka stepped inside and quickly removed their shoes. Naruto opened his mouth in awe as he stared around at the house, blindly stepping up onto the platform and following obediently as Shikamaru and his mother led them into another wing of the house. Inside their dining room, the walls were decorated with screens depicting images of deer grazing. In the soft light filtering in from the windows on the door, they almost seemed to be alive. Naruto snapped out of his daze as Iruka gently nudged him. He gulped fearfully as he saw the dining table set up before him, preceded by the Nara family. He had never seen Shikamaru's father before, and couldn't help but feel frightened at first, but then it occurred to him that the man was like a combination of Iruka and Shikamaru. Thinking that calmed him, although his heart still raced when his eyes fell on Shikamaru's mother. Unbidden memories surfaced in his mind and Naruto forcefully swallowed his rising panic. Why did Shikamaru's mother have to look so much like Mama-san? "Iruka-san, Naruto, this is my mother, Nara Yoshino, and my father, Nara Shikaku," Shikamaru introduced. "Mother, father, this is Naruto and Iruka-san. Welcome to our home," Yoshino spoke graciously. "Oh, the pleasure is ours. We're sorry to intrude upon your hospitality," Iruka replied, reciting the customary greeting. Yoshino waved her hands dismissively. "Not at all. It's wonderful to finally meet you. Shikamaru has spoken of you often. Please, make yourselves comfortable while I bring out the food. Shikamaru, will you help me?" "Fine," he grumbled, earning a reproachful look from his mother. He shrugged nonchalantly and made a face that only Naruto could see, causing him to stifle a giggle. As they disappeared through the door to the kitchen, Iruka and Naruto knelt at the table. "Sorry this is so formal," Shikaku spoke up gruffly, seeming somewhat out of sorts in his ceremonial attire. "Yoshino loves dinner parties much more than any normal, sensible woman should." "I heard that. Now be polite," came Yoshino's disembodied voice from around the corner. Shikaku sighed heavily and leaned forward to whisper conspiratorially to Iruka. "She's got us on a tight string around here. You're lucky to not be hitched yet." Iruka smiled unsurely at this odd remark and decided not to comment. Yoshino had a forced smile on her face as she re-emerged with some plates of food. As she sat down, she glared pointedly at her husband before resuming pleasantries. "So, Iruka-san, how is your job going? I hear you are working at the academy?" Iruka nodded. "Yes, I love it there. It's wonderful to be able to make a difference in a child's life. I'm sure it is, Yoshino smiled warmly, eyeing Naruto appreciatively as she began to serve them. With a chorus of "Itadakimasu," they began to eat. Naruto, for one, was very careful to eat as politely as he could. Iruka coughed uncomfortably. Anyways, I like to think that I'm helping the future of Konoha by steering the bright young minds of today in a positive direction. Well said, Shikaku agreed. Perhaps you will get the chance to teach our Shikamaru here. Perhaps so. I look forward to the opportunity, Iruka answered politely. Really? Yoshino interrupted. Well, be prepared. I'm afraid Shikamaru has picked up his father's bad habit of laziness. Mom, Shikamaru groaned as Shikaku rolled his eyes. Really, I can't believe I married into this family. To think that Nara men have such attitudes. She turned to regard Iruka with pursed lips. Don't be afraid to push Shikamaru if he ends up in your class. He'll need the extra encouragement. Mom, Shikamaru grumbled exasperatedly. Yoshino didn't look the least bit ashamed. I'm just saying that Iruka-san should not be afraid to use discipline if he must. A great teacher commands respect in even their most unmotivated students. Yes, thank you for your wise words, Nara-san, Iruka stammered. Yoshino's face grew sad suddenly. I do hope you weren't so unfortunate to have taught that Uchiha boy. He surely could have used some more discipline. A pall fell over the dinner, causing them all to stop eating for a moment. Even Naruto and Shikamaru had heard about what had happened to the Uchiha clan, and though they didn't fully understand the reasoning behind it, they recognized what a tragedy it was. What a terrible thing, Yoshino broke the silence in a small voice. And that poor boy, Sasuke. To be left alone, so young. He's only a bit older than our boys. Iruka smiled grimly as he squeezed Naruto's knee affectionately, knowing that the words, our boys, were resonating in Naruto's mind. Another silence followed before Yoshino abruptly shook her head and rather obviously changed the subject. Well, on a different matter, Shikamaru's birthday is coming up. Really? Iruka spoke with interest. September 22nd, Yoshino clarified with a broad smile. Mom always makes a big deal out of it, Shikamaru groused. Yoshino drew herself up. Well, it's not every day that my only son turns 7 years old. But you're going to invite the whole town. Shikamaru protested. It makes the party so troublesome with so many people. Yoshino hummed thoughtfully, acknowledging his point. Then maybe we'll just do a small party with family and close friends. You'd be invited, of course, Naruto. Naruto jumped a little when she said his name, and shyly smiled without meeting her eyes. Suddenly, his smile became a fierce scowl of contemplation. Iruka noticed Naruto's mood change first and frowned worriedly. Naruto, what's the matter? Naruto didn't answer for a moment and then he glanced up anxiously. What's a party? He asked in a thin, wavery voice. He shrunk into himself as the entire table turned to stare at him in varying levels of shock. Naruto rushed to explain this strangeness of his. At the orphanage, Mama-san and the others always mentioned parties, but I was never allowed to go to them and I always wondered what they were, so he trailed off and bit his lip, willing himself to remain strong in the onslaught of such looks. Shikamaru was the first to speak. You've never been to a party? He breathed incredulously. Naruto shook his head, internally berating himself for having done something wrong. But what about the holiday festivals? Shikamaru persisted, morbidly curious. Naruto shook his head slowly. Mama-san always locked me up. She said I wasn't allowed to go. His voice faded away altogether as the table slowly recovered. Oh, Naruto, Yoshino spoke gently. She reached out to comfort him, but he misinterpreted her gesture and violently flinched backward. Yoshino gasped as Naruto's eyes grew wide, horrified at his instinctive reaction. I am so sorry, he stammered as he leapt to his feet and ran from the room. He didn't really know where he was going, and the film of tears over his eyes didn't help matters. He ended up in the entrance hall, where he collapsed onto the edge of the platform and hugged himself desperately. He knew he couldn't stay, and yet he was obliged to wait for Iruka, although he wasn't even sure the man would still come to bring him home. Why was he so stupid? Wasn't he weird enough without having to bring up stories of his past? To be honest, he hadn't really thought before the words burst from his mouth. He had just always been curious about what a party was, and now, thanks to his stupidity, he would never know. Shikamaru's parents would probably never want their son to see him again, and then the same would happen with Choji. All his precious people would leave him and… Hey, there you are. Naruto sniffled as he glanced up quickly and saw Shikamaru standing in the doorway. Embarrassed, he turned his head away. He felt Shikamaru's presence settle beside him on the landing a moment later. It's okay, Naruto, Shikamaru began awkwardly. I mean, my mother scares everyone. She's a scary person, really. I'm terrified of her. Naruto choked a little as a chuckle escaped him. Shikamaru took this to heart and plowed on, grinning. My dad's especially afraid of her. I once told him that she was standing behind him when she actually wasn't and he began to shake. Naruto giggled a bit and sniffled again. Shikamaru's smile dropped off his face. But you know, my mom would never hurt you. We were all just surprised, you know? We don't hate you and we don't want you to leave, he added, recalling Naruto's previous incident and working to intercept the younger boy's negative mindset before it got any worse. But, aren't I weird? Naruto ventured tentatively. Of course you are, Shikamaru said brashly. We're all weird. Seriously, you're talking to a guy that stares at clouds all day. This time Naruto couldn't suppress his chuckle and laughed out loud. Shikamaru smiled, happy to help Naruto cheer up. Say, why don't we head back to dinner? He suggested. We'll miss dessert if we stay out here. And as terrifying as my mom is, she makes some good food, so you don't want to miss her desserts. Especially since she's been preparing for this dinner party for weeks now. Naruto managed a small smile and allowed Shikamaru to help him to his feet. As they approached the dining room, Naruto heard them quickly resume a conversation so as not to make his reappearance awkward. Welcome back, Yoshino greeted Naruto warmly, although she was careful to not make any sudden moves that would alarm him. Iruka's face was the image of worry as Naruto knelt beside him. You alright? He asked anxiously. Naruto peeked up at him before growing ashamed. He hated making Iruka worry. He nodded vigorously, forcing a smile onto his face. Iruka relaxed only slightly, aware of Naruto's mask. Naruto, he began in a concerned undertone. We have a surprise for you. Yoshino broke in, causing Naruto to start. He glanced up shyly. While you were gone, she continued, undeterred, Iruka-san, Shikaku and I were discussing Shikamaru's birthday party, and we were thinking that, since your birthday is also coming up, we should just combine efforts and have one big party. Naruto blinked in confusion. Shikamaru noticed and hurried to explain. She means that we'll celebrate our birthdays together. Naruto stared at him, and then his face broke into an odd expression. You mean, I could go to a party? You would be the star of the party, Yoshino corrected. She winked at Shikamaru, believing that her son would be a bit miffed at not being mentioned. To her surprise, Shikamaru was grinning encouragingly and offering some of his past birthday experiences to elicit Naruto's growing excitement. Presents? Naruto breathed suddenly. Oh yeah, that's the best part about birthdays. Shikamaru laughed. Yoshino felt her heart clench in pride, and exchanged proud looks with her husband. Shikaku nodded slowly and Yoshino had to hold back her sudden emotion at realizing that her son was truly growing up. Iruka, on the other hand, exhaled in relief at seeing Naruto seem to forget his previous mindset as the prospect of having a birthday party dominated his thoughts. He found himself smiling as Naruto's face grew increasingly animated. Wow, Naruto uttered at last, his eyes bright. I can't wait for the party. The Nara family smiled at his exuberance as Yoshino brushed a tear out of her eye. I certainly can't either. We'll start planning immediately. Do keep in touch, she addressed Iruka, who nodded. During dessert, everyone talked about the upcoming party and what to add to it. Naruto hit his excitement peak and then began to get tired as the course ended. Iruka helped him stand up as the Nara family followed them to the door. Thank you for having us, Iruka said humbly. Everything was delicious. You're very welcome. If there are any problems, please do not hesitate to contact us. You're welcome anytime, Yoshino replied. Then she turned to Naruto. This party will be very special, I promise. Naruto avoided her gaze and, before anyone could react, hugged her quickly. Yoshino felt a lump in her throat and found that she couldn't say anything else. Well, safe journey home, Shikaku filled in for her. Iruka smiled at them and gripped Naruto's hand as they exited the Nara's home and returned to their own. On the way, Naruto grew so sleepy that it was hard for him to walk, so Iruka picked him up and carried him. He was fast asleep before they even reached the door. Naruto was brimming with barely contained excitement. He fidgeted as Iruka vainly attempted to straighten his clothing before jumping to his feet and running to the front door of the Nara home. After he peeked out the window, he ran back to the dining room where the Nara family plus Iruka were watching him in amusement. Do you think everyone will come?" he asked breathlessly, stuttering as the words tripped over his tongue in a hurried effort to escape his mouth. "Of course they'll come, Naruto." Yoshino smiled brightly. Naruto met her eyes and grinned in reply. "Thank you, Yoshino-san," he said for the 100th time. Aye. He glanced around and gestured wildly at the birthday decorations and food laid out for their soon-to-arrive guests. "It's no problem, dear," Yoshino answered, her eyes twinkling. Beside her with a grimace on his face sat Shikamaru. He rolled his eyes. "Stop thanking her already or she'll make an even bigger fuss next year," he groused, earning a sharp look from his mother. "Turning 7 is very important, and this is Naruto's first party," she replied, adding emphasis to the latter part of her statement. "How can I not go all out?" "Shikamaru, aren't you excited?" Naruto asked suddenly, confused. "It's a party." Shikamaru shrugged noncommittally. "Meh, it's too troublesome to get excited. Takes too much effort." Suddenly, there came a knock at the door. Naruto's eyes widened and, with a nod from Yoshino, raced to the door. Choruses of "Choji" and "Naruto, Happy Birthday" floated around the corner. "Oh boy. Here it begins," Shikamaru muttered darkly, exchanging looks with his father. The party was truly underway. After greeting the Akamichis, they all gathered in the dining room and began to eat heartily, as was the custom of the Akamichi family. It wasn't long before the volume increased as the adults caught up with one another. Choza had some particularly hilarious stories to relate if his loud, boisterous tone was any comment. Meanwhile, Shikamaru, Choji and Naruto ventured outside to avoid the noise. "So, what do you think you're going to get?" Choji questioned Naruto as they dangled their legs over the side of the porch. I don't know. What do people usually get? If you're unlucky enough to be a Nara, you get a quilt with pictures of deer on it. And then some clothes with deer on it. And if you're really unlucky, my mom will even give you a hat with antlers." Choji muffled laughter as even Naruto cracked a grin. "You should wear it, Shikamaru." Choji giggled. Shikamaru made a face. "I would rather not. You should wear it." He poked at Choji who jerked away from Shikamaru with a laugh. "Don't poke me. I'll never wear a hat like that. Never in a million years. It would look too silly. It would be a good thing to wear if you were robbing Yakiniku-Kyu." Shikamaru laughed. Choji looked horrified. "I would never rob Yakiniku-Kyu. Their meat is too yummy to go unpaid. Besides, they'd catch me. No one but you wears hats with antlers. I do not wear hats like that." "Hey, Naruto, maybe you should wear it." "Naruto?" Naruto jumped and glanced at his friends. He had been lost in thought, consumed with musings of what presents he would receive. He hoped ramen would be a part of them. Naruto shook his head. "No, I'm not wearing that hat." Naruto's smile faded. "I stick out enough," he added quietly. Choji and Shikamaru made no comment to this, and Choji decided to change the subject. "So who else is coming, Shikamaru?" Shikamaru groaned. "Knowing my mother, she invited the Yamanakas." "The who?" Naruto asked. "Yamanakas," Choji repeated. "Yamanaka Inoichi-san was on our father's genin team when they were in the ninja academy." "So what's the matter?" Naruto persisted, noting Shikamaru's sour expression. "Ino," was all Shikamaru said. "Ino? What's that?" Naruto questioned. "A girl." Naruto blinked. "A girl? But what's so bad about that?" "She's annoying," Shikamaru said flatly. Even Choji nodded slightly in agreement. "My mother always invites them," Shikamaru continued. "It's just because our fathers were friends. Why should I have to go through the torment of Ino just because of that?" "Did someone say my name?" sang a high-pitched voice. Shikamaru cringed as the three simultaneously turned around to see a skinny blonde girl in purple standing behind them. Next to her stood a girl with short pink hair and a red dress. "I was just saying to your mother that it's very rude that you didn't meet us at the door," Ino continued, seemingly oblivious to Shikamaru's negative reaction to her presence. "But I guess that's just the way you are, Shikamaru." Her pupil-less eyes scanned the group and alighted upon Naruto, who was gaping openly at the pink-haired girl. "Who are you?" Ino interrupted, and then added offhandedly, "Oh, by the way, this is my friend Haruno Sakura." Sakura bowed clumsily and blushed at Naruto's wide stares. "So who are you?" Ino repeated sternly. "I asked you a question." She put her hands on her hips. Naruto suddenly regained awareness and closed his mouth with a pop. I'm Uzumaki Naruto," he introduced himself shyly. Ino gasped. "Uzumaki Naruto? I heard the adults talking. You're why my mom didn't want to come to the party." At these words, Naruto seemed to shrivel inside himself. Fiercely, Shikamaru stood up and faced Ino. "Go away!" he shouted at her, his instincts to protect Naruto fully awakened. Ino looked offended. "I didn't mean, I said leave us alone." Ino pouted. "We came to wish you a happy birthday. We even brought you presents." "I don't care. Your best present to me would have been to not show up." She gasped in outrage before scowling. "I'm telling your mother about this. And she won't be happy." Ino stomped off, leaving Sakura awkwardly behind. "Hey, Naruto, sorry about that." Shikamaru spoke in a quieter tone as he gently wrapped his arm around the smaller boy's frame. "Yeah, it's just Ino. I wouldn't take anything she says seriously," Choji added. Naruto remained hunched over until Sakura approached. "Ino can be kind of mean sometimes. I don't think she realizes it." "Sorry," Sakura said, truly apologetic. Naruto glanced up hesitantly and found that Sakura was smiling warmly at him. "It's nice to meet you," she added. "Why you too?" Naruto answered, grinning slightly. "So, I hear it's your birthday too." Naruto nodded. "Well, not quite yet. In about 2 weeks. It's October 10th. Sakura gasped softly at the date and then grimaced ruefully. "That's rotten luck. But happy birthday anyways." "Thanks," Naruto breathed timidly. Shikamaru. "Boys, come inside. It's time to celebrate," called Yoshino suddenly. Shikamaru sighed heavily. "Time to get smothered," he muttered as the group rose and walked inside. As they sat down in the dining room, Naruto got the first glimpse of Ino's imposing father, and felt a small chill race down his spine as those pupil-less eyes connected with his own. Quickly, he looked away and found himself gazing at Ino, who appeared to have overcome her anger since she was smiling exuberantly. "It's cake time," she declared. "Cake?" Naruto repeated in confusion. He knew what cake was, and that it was usually associated with parties, but he never expected to have it at his own celebration. "Indeed, indeed," Chiharu sang as she shouldered through the group carrying a massive tray which she set in front of Naruto and Shikamaru. Before both boys sat one cake each, Naruto's respectively in the shape of a ramen bowl topped with a fish cake, and Shikamaru's in the shape of a wistful cloud set against a brilliant blue sky. Naruto's eyes widened incredulously. "This is, for me?" he breathed. Chiharu beamed brilliantly. "This is the Akamichi present to you both. Happy birthday boys." Even Shikamaru was impressed. "Thanks, Chiharu-san. Ooh, I want the first piece." Ino chorused, but then grew quiet with a look from her father. "Naruto, would you like a piece?" Iruka asked, holding out a knife. "But it's so pretty. I can't eat it. Can't we save it?" he implored. The adults laughed, the Akamichis most of all. "We made it for you. Go ahead and enjoy it," Chiharu encouraged. "I don't mind. We could start with mine if you want, and save yours for later," Shikamaru suggested. "Trust me, you'll want to eat it after the first bite. Nothing can top a cake from the Akamichi family." Shikamaru's words proved true as Naruto experienced the most wonderful sugary sensation he had ever had. So many flavors made his taste buds burst alive. He could feel the sugar coursing through him and immediately requested more. "Your cake is truly delicious, Chiharu-san. But are you sure it was a good idea to give so much sugar to the kids?" Iruka asked laughingly as the children began to visibly burst with energy. This is almost as good as the cake you made for me, Chiharu-san." Ino chattered, turning to Sakura and describing her own birthday cake in detail for her friend to imagine. "Shall we do presents now?" Yoshino suggested over the din once everyone was finished. "Yeah," Shikamaru agreed, rowdier than usual due to an overwhelming amount of sugar. Since Shikamaru's birthday was first, he got to open his presents first. The first thing he picked up was Choji's present, a bag of Shikamaru's favorite sweets. Shikamaru thanked Choji profusely as he picked up another package. From the Yamanakas, plus Sakura, he received a handsome set of shuriken and a new, handmade pack intended for future use at the Ninja Academy. In the same frame of mind, Iruka and Naruto gave Shikamaru a strategy game meant to hone skills that would later come in handy whilst training as a ninja. He opened his parents' gifts last and found a set of books on taijutsu, ninjutsu and other such skills that made Shikamaru's eyebrows rise. "It's like you're all preparing me for something," he said sarcastically after thanking everyone. "Well, you're going to attend the academy, of course," Yoshino stated matter-of-factly. Shikamaru didn't look too pleased with the idea. "But that means I'll have to study. How troublesome. Can't I just stay home?" "Definitely not," Yoshino interrupted, miffed. "You've got to live up to the Nara name," Choza added loudly, winking pointedly at Shikaku, who rolled his eyes. "Whatever," Shikamaru grumbled dismissively. He turned to Naruto. "Your turn for presents." Naruto beamed at him and began to carefully unwrap his gifts. The first one contained a set of storybooks that Naruto gaped at, utterly pleased. As he flipped through them, he began to recognize some words and his smile grew. "Thank you so much, Shikaku-san, Yoshino-san and Shikamaru. I'll definitely read these." "We know you will," Yoshino murmured proudly. Naruto picked up an envelope next, which he tore open and found a letter inside. Unable to read it, he ushered it to Iruka, whose eyes widened. "Naruto, the Naras and Akamichis have created a bank account for you. And they've..." His voice trailed off as he shook his head in speechless wonder. "You shouldn't have done this. It's too much." "Nonsense," Yoshino declared, waving her hand dismissively. "We understand how hard it may be, so we're just giving you some help." "But this," Iruka sputtered, "we can't accept this. Your humbleness is becoming, Iruka, but we insist," Shikaku spoke up for the first time. "And if you need any more help along the way, you let us know," Chiharu added, clenching hands with her equally grinning husband. "You're much too kind. We don't deserve this kind of generosity," Iruka persisted in vain. "Bah, of course you do. We all want to see Naruto get big and strong," Choza boomed. "So how much is it?" Ino interjected abruptly, but then changed tactics. "Ah," Naruto's blushing. Indeed, Naruto's face was flushed bright red with a mixture of pleasure and embarrassment. While it was strange to be cared about by so many people, it was also wonderful and it made Naruto conflicted as to how he should feel. Iruka covered Naruto's embarrassment by bowing his head and thanking the families profusely. He also draped an arm around Naruto and tugged the boy closer to him, squeezing him in mutual understanding. Once that episode was over, Naruto finished opening his gifts. From Choji, he received a huge pack of potato chips, and from the Yamanakas a complimentary box of assorted candies. "I hope you like them," Ino said after Naruto had finished thanking them. "Strawberry's my favorite. I'll definitely try it and see," he spoke meekly, recalling his friend's advice. At this, Ino cocked her head and frowned at him. "You know, you're not as weird as I thought." "Thanks," Naruto replied before getting tapped on the shoulder by Iruka. The older man nodded toward the door and Naruto obediently stood and followed him outside as the noise level swelled behind them. On the porch, Iruka revealed one last gift that Naruto hadn't been aware he was concealing. "This last one is from me," Iruka clarified. "It's a bit special." Naruto took his words to heart and gingerly unwrapped this precious gift. In awe, he removed a pair of strange knife-like weapons. "They're called kunai," Iruka explained. "They're one of the most basic weapons used by ninja. They're important for two reasons. The first is that, with these, you could train to become a ninja and join the ninja academy. And Naruto, if you're up for it, we can start training as soon as possible. You can learn to defend yourself and protect others." Naruto's eyes glistened as he nodded mutely, too choked up to respond. Iruka smiled happily. "And the second reason they're important is that these were my very first kunai." Naruto glanced up at Iruka sharply, who merely nodded in confirmation. "Yes, indeed. These very kunai saved my life on a number of occasions. I figured it was about time to pass them on to the next generation." Naruto sniffled and before Iruka could react, threw himself into Iruka's arms, hugging the older man fiercely. "Thank you," Naruto strained, his face buried in Iruka's chest. Iruka pulled Naruto closer and embraced him in return. "You're welcome, Naruto," he breathed softly. "I hope you've enjoyed your birthday party." "Of course," Naruto sniffed. "This is the best birthday I've ever had." In the weeks following the party, the adults seemed to have formed a tacit, mutual agreement. Upon Iruka's declaration to start training Naruto, Shikaku and Choza took it upon themselves to begin their son's formal preparation for entry to the Ninja Academy. The boys were, after all, 7 years old and the normal admittance age was 8. With a year's worth of training, the boys could truly be ready for the challenges they would face, giving them a huge advantage over the others. Of course, Naruto was a special case. Considering how far behind he was, what with having received little to no education at the hands of Mama-san, his progress was remarkable. Iruka loved to teach, and Naruto was a willing recipient of his practice. Iruka couldn't help but grow proud at his adopted son's determination, for, even though Naruto was still very behind, he put in the most effort Iruka had ever seen in a student, and he knew that in no time Naruto would join his friends. The only problem was that Iruka had to work constantly. While Shikaku and Choza could devote entire days to their sons when they weren't on missions, Iruka had to be at the academy. As such, he always felt that he was depriving Naruto of his true education. Iruka wished he could give Naruto all the time in the world, but he was struggling to stay afloat as it was, and simply couldn't spare another moment. He tried his best, however, and whenever he had a chance, he would teach Naruto something basic that he could practice on his own. Even though Iruka was oftentimes drained from a full day of work, he could not in good conscience go to bed without having Naruto read to him, or write a letter, or assume a basic taijutsu stance, or demonstrate the hand signs. Oftentimes he found himself explaining Konoha history whilst simultaneously making dinner, providing both a fun and educational environment in which Naruto thrived. Naruto was especially perceptive to Iruka's increased efforts to teach him. At first, he felt bad that the man should go to such lengths for him, but then he accepted the routine with ardor, knowing that Iruka wouldn't back down. So, he set his jaw determinedly and soaked in Iruka's words with rapt attention, constantly rehashing the information in his head so he wouldn't forget anything. He was so appreciative of Iruka that he couldn't possibly let anything go to waste. Unfortunately, as much as Naruto loved learning, the fact that Shikamaru and Choji were also training meant that he had less time to spend with them. It seemed that both Choza and Shikaku had much to impart to their sons, so Naruto wasn't necessarily allowed to intrude upon them. While Naruto had the feeling that they would let him join, he found that he couldn't take away from their family time. Besides, he figured that, being part of big clans, they had family secrets that he simply couldn't learn about. Shikamaru confirmed this when they discussed their respective training sessions. It appeared that, while Choji's were physical in nature, Shikamaru was getting a rundown of his clan's history and medicinal practices. While Shikamaru didn't appear too enthused about this new schedule, Naruto knew he was far more interested in this aspect than taijutsu, figuring that the lazy boy preferred mental exercises over physical labor any day. On the other hand, Choji was very excited about his training, commenting enthusiastically about witnessing his father perform and then instruct him how to complete several of their clan's signature techniques. Naruto also noticed that, even though Choji wasn't slimming down or eating any less, his excess weight was turning into hard muscle that would certainly aid him in the future. When he spoke his thoughts aloud, Shikamaru readily agreed with his assessment, making Choji blush happily. Naruto's time with Choji and Shikamaru was drastically reduced, so he cherished the moments he had with them. Initially, it was a hard adjustment to this new way of life. Naruto found himself with copious amounts of time which, at first, he used to clean the apartment and make sure everything was spick and span. It made Iruka have less things to do, and it made him feel better that he was at least contributing. He wished there was more he could do for Iruka, but the older man continually assured him that as long as Naruto was happy, that was enough. One day while Naruto was in the middle of dusting, there came a knock at the door. Cautiously, Naruto went and opened it, smiling when he saw that it was Inu-san. Inu-san, he greeted warmly. "Hello, Naruto. How are you doing?" "Great," Naruto exclaimed. "Are you here to help me dust?" "No," came the bemused reply. "I have a request from the Hokage. He would like to see you. Would you mind coming now?" Naruto blinked at him and then nodded eagerly, attempting to summon an image of the Hokage in his mind. It had been a while since he had last seen the man. In fact, it had been months. "Follow me." Locking the door behind him, Naruto followed Inu-san through Konoha, dodging the most crowded areas, for which Naruto was grateful. When they stopped, Naruto stared up at the Hokage Tower in wonder. He had seen the impressive building from a distance, but now, standing right next to it, it was truly a sight to behold. "How do you get all the way to the top?" he asked aloud, looking up and up and up with his mouth open. "Stairs. Unless you're a ninja. Want me to give you a lift?" Before Naruto could say anything, Inu-san had grabbed him and they were flying through the air. Wind rushed by him, causing Naruto's vision to blur. It seemed that it took only a heartbeat for them to reach the level where the Hokage was sitting at his desk, at which point they entered through the window. "Ah, you startled me," the Hokage admonished Inu-san as they landed. Naruto swayed a little but was grinning broadly. Would he get to do something as amazing as that when he was a ninja? The thought was too enticing to ignore. "My apologies, Hokage-sama." Of course, the Hokage answered sternly, though his lips threatened to twitch into a smile as he eyed Naruto. "So, Naruto, it's been a while," he continued. As Inu-san backed away to give them privacy, Naruto stepped forward and shyly glanced at his feet. "Yeah, I wanted to check up on you, to see how you were doing with Iruka. I must admit that I was a little concerned at first." "No," Naruto interrupted and then quieted. "I mean," he said more softly, I love being with Iruka. He found that he couldn't quite put his feelings into words, but when he lifted his gaze, he found that the Hokage's eyes were reflecting understanding. "You don't know how happy that makes me. I am so glad you found a good home, Naruto," the old man said sincerely. Indeed, the skin around his eyes seemed to loosen a little as he spoke those words. "It's great," Naruto burst out suddenly. "I made friends and then I met their families and they're really nice. We had a birthday party and I got lots of presents and I was so happy. It was the best party I've ever had. And then Iruka gave me some kunai and now he's training me and I've decided that I want to be a ninja." The Hokage blinked serenely as Naruto's words rushed out of his mouth in one long stream of air. Only the last bit was distinguishable. "A ninja?" Naruto nodded vigorously. "Especially if I can fly like Inu-san." "Fly?" the Hokage repeated dubiously before chuckling. "Ah yes, that's a good aspiration to have. You've got to train and study hard then." "Yeah," Naruto agreed enthusiastically. The Hokage's smile faded slightly. "But Naruto, be prepared. Not everyone at the academy is going to be nice to you," he added delicately. Naruto's bright face extinguished immediately as he swallowed hard. "I know," he murmured. His face slowly transformed into a frown of contemplation. Hokage-sama?" The Hokage braced himself. I used to think I was a bad person," tremored Naruto's small voice. "But now I don't know anymore." Do you know?" he finished timidly, abruptly trembling at the anticipated response. The Hokage inwardly sighed in relief. "Naruto, I know for sure that you are not a bad person. You are far from it, in fact." "Really?" Naruto breathed, daring to hope. "Absolutely," the Hokage emphasized. Naruto grew thoughtful once more, causing the Hokage to inhale a sharp breath. "But, if I'm not a bad person, then why?" "I'm sorry, Naruto," the Hokage cut in, fearing it would come to this. "But I am unable to answer that question at this time. I promise that when you're old enough, I will explain everything. For now, I'm afraid you'll just have to endure for a little longer." Naruto hung his head. "On the bright side, you should focus on your ninja training," the Hokage tried to cheer him up. "Who knows, maybe someday you'll get your head carved into the mountain as Hokage." "Really?" Naruto asked with wide eyes. "Oh yes. And Hokages can do more than just fly," he hinted, winking as Naruto gasped. "Wow, I should become Hokage." The Hokage laughed. "That's right. Good luck with your training, and please give this to Iruka for me." He handed Naruto an envelope and dismissed him. Just as Inu-san was about to give Naruto a ride down, the Hokage stopped them. They both paused at the window, to which the Hokage smirked. "Before you leave, I just wanted to say one more thing." Naruto held his breath. "Happy birthday, Naruto." Naruto grinned and then let out a scream as Inu-san dropped out of the window. The Hokage leaned back in his chair. "I'll have to look out for that one. Another worthy contender of my job," the old man laughed dryly. He turned to wistfully stare out at the sky. Someday. Iruka was surprised when Naruto related this adventure to him later that night, and decided it was best to wait to open the Hokage's envelope. When he was sure Naruto was fast asleep, he crept into the kitchen and gently tore open the wrapping. Inside was a heartfelt thank you note accompanied with a check and a notice that Iruka was about to receive a significant raise. Iruka stared at the contents of the envelope for a good 10 minutes, trying to process them, before he finally decided to go to sleep. After putting the envelope away, he crawled into bed with his mind still reeling. A few days later, Naruto found himself alone and rather bored. He had cleaned every possible surface of his home, finished all the laundry, dusted all the shelves and even vacuumed all the floors. To his knowledge, everything was in its place. Books were stacked neatly, the bed was made. Naruto had nothing else to do, and Shikamaru and Choji were both busy. He decided to practice stances and hand signs, which took about an hour. Then he sat down to do some reading and writing, but whenever he got stuck, there was no one to correct him. It got so frustrating that he had to put it away. At last, Naruto couldn't help it. He put on a light coat and headed outside, locking the door behind him. He had two plans in mind. 1. Search for Inu-san and beg him to teach him some cool techniques, and 2. Stop by Ichiraku's for a meal, since it had been a while since he had last seen them. Considering that Naruto knew Inu-san was sneaky, he decided to go on some roundabout routes through Konoha in hopes of catching him. He knew the Anbu was pretty stealthy, but he wanted to challenge himself and see if he had developed the ninja senses Iruka had told him about. While he was snooping for Inu-san on the outskirts of Konoha, Naruto came across a road he had never seen before. In the distance, he could see the sparkles of the sunlight on water, and he was intrigued. Following the road, he came to a connecting path that led down to a dock on which someone was sitting. Squinting, Naruto thought he could make out a picture on the back of a black-haired boy's shirt. He gasped when he realized who it was. The red and white fan was unmistakable. Naruto was staring at the last surviving member of the Uchiha clan. Uchiha Sasuke. From where Naruto was standing, the boy didn't look out of place, and yet so much had happened to him that it seemed odd that he was so normal looking. Naruto wondered what he was doing all by himself, staring at his reflection in the water. Was he practicing a technique? Naruto had heard that he was already the top of his class at the Ninja Academy, and he was only 7 years old. As Naruto stared at him further, he realized that Sasuke wasn't practicing a technique. He was just sitting, deadly still, staring at his reflection as his fists clenched and unclenched. The boy seemed to be experiencing some rather harsh emotions, and Naruto felt a stab of empathy. He knew what it was like to be lonely. He couldn't imagine what Sasuke must be going through, having had someone and then getting them ripped away. Naruto shuddered to think of losing Iruka, or Choji or Shikamaru, and his insides clenched painfully. Thinking of Choji and Shikamaru reminded Naruto of the beginning of their friendship. He had been alone before he met them, and they had really changed his life. Maybe Sasuke needed a friend, too. Maybe Naruto could be the one to help him overcome his sadness and anger. It was worth a try, wasn't it? Naruto slowly approached Sasuke, not wanting to scare him. As he got closer, he saw Sasuke's eyes flicker back to him, so he knew Sasuke was aware of his presence. Hi, he said shyly. Go away, Sasuke interrupted coldly. I don't care who you are. Just leave me alone. But, Naruto tried feebly, suddenly at a loss for what to say. He hadn't expected Sasuke to be so blunt. I wanted to invite you to a great restaurant I know. Why would I go somewhere with you? I don't even know who you are. Naruto bristled. I tried to introduce myself but you wouldn't let me. Sasuke shrugged indifferently and ignored him. Naruto contained his anger, trying to remember the tragedy Sasuke had undergone. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. At this pronouncement, Sasuke abruptly shifted to stare at Naruto with wide eyes. You're Naruto? He repeated incredulously. Naruto wasn't sure he liked Sasuke's tone of voice, but nodded anyways. You're the one everyone calls a monster? Naruto swallowed. Yes, he uttered quietly, willing himself to not look down at his feet in shame. Suddenly Sasuke burst out laughing. It was cruel and deriding, and when it finally stopped, his lips curled into a sneer. You do realize who I am, right? He demanded. Naruto clenched his fists. Of course I do. Then you realize that I can't possibly be seen with a freak like you. Why would you invite me anywhere with you? Naruto bit back his tears. Because I was trying to be nice, he shouted. Yeah, well, I don't need your pity, freak. Sasuke yelled back. I don't need anyone's pity. I wish everyone would just leave me alone. Fine. I will. Naruto screamed as he turned on his heel and stomped away. When he finally returned to Konoha, a thin film of tears had obscured his vision, so he paused to wipe them away. How could Sasuke be so cruel? He was only trying to help him. Maybe he was just too far gone, Naruto surmised. Maybe Sasuke didn't deserve anyone's help. Even though his mind accepted these conclusions, Naruto couldn't help but feel his heart tighten. He understood Sasuke just a little too much. After composing himself, he re-entered Konoha with the purpose of dining at Ichiraku's, foregoing his impossible search for Inu-san. As he rounded a particular corner, he thought he heard someone calling his name. He spun around and came face to face with a breathless Sakura. "Naruto, hey," she greeted him. "Remember me?" Naruto felt his mouth open and quickly shut it before she noticed. How could he have possibly forgotten someone as pretty as her? "Of course I remember you," he stammered quickly. Sakura giggled at his discomfiture and then changed the subject. "So, what are you up to?" Naruto bit his lip. "Nothing much. I was, heading to lunch at Ichiraku's." Really? Lunch sounds good right now. Can I come with you? My mom gave me some money to spend where I want." Naruto felt a blush creep onto his face. Was Sakura asking to go on a date with him? Sure. Naruto strained through a mouth that had suddenly gone bone dry. "Great," Sakura chirped. "Lead the way." Naruto almost fainted when she grabbed his hand, and was surprised when, despite himself, he found himself involuntarily steering her toward Ichiraku's. When they got inside and settled onto two bar stools, Tucci turned around and displayed a brilliant smile. "My favorite customer. It's been a while, Naruto." "Yeah, it has." Naruto agreed. "Oh, Naruto." Ayame greeted as she appeared behind the counter. Suddenly, she noticed Sakura and winked pointedly at him. "Who's this? Your girlfriend?" "No," Naruto said more forcefully than he intended. Sakura seemed oblivious to this conversation as she exchanged pleasantries with Tucci. "Really?" Ayame teased slyly, her mouth setting into a smirk. Naruto nodded vigorously as he shrank down into his seat, mortified. Ayame laughed and turned to her father. "What do you say we give Naruto and his friend here a discount?" Tucci pondered this for a moment before his face lit up. "Why, of course. That's a wonderful idea. Now, Naruto, are you going to introduce us to your friend or what here?" "Oh, I'm Haruno Sakura," Sakura introduced herself. "It's nice to meet you." She glanced at Naruto. "I didn't know you were a regular customer here." Naruto shrugged. "Yeah, I started coming here a few months ago." "Then you must have tried everything on the menu." "What's good?" "Well, I've actually only had the ramen. It's my favorite." "Ramen?" Sakura repeated dubiously, scrunching up her face in thought. I guess I'll try it. I'll have whatever Naruto's having," she declared to Tucci and Ayame, whose smiles broadened at Naruto's further embarrassment. Luckily, as they waited for their meals to arrive, Sakura asked Naruto about what was going on and he easily slipped into the description of his daily routine. Sakura seemed interested in his ninja training, although she was more surprised at his inability to read and write. Naruto grew very shame-faced and discouraged at this, but was fortunately brought out of this mood when their orders arrived. Although Sakura didn't enjoy her ramen nearly as much as Naruto did, she still thought it was tasty and finished it to the last drop. At the end of their meal, they paid their bill and bade farewell to Ayame and Tucci, who, on their way out, wished Naruto a happy birthday. Out on the street, Sakura asked if Naruto had anything he had to do. "Not really," he answered uncertainly, not knowing where she was going with this. "I just promised Ino I'd come stop by her house today." "Want to come?" Naruto tried but didn't have time to decide as Sakura grabbed his arm and dragged him along. They ended up at a lovely flower shop that Naruto hesitated to enter. "What's the matter, Naruto?" "I don't think," he trailed off, Ino's blunt words coming back to him. "Uzumaki Naruto? I heard the adults talking. You're why my mom didn't want to come to the party." "Naruto?" Sakura repeated, frowning in concern. "Oi, Sakura, you came," cried a voice as Ino bounded out of the shop wearing her typical outfit but this time with a blue apron over it. "Ino-chan," Sakura greeted, smiling at her friend. "Ah, you brought Naruto," Ino said in surprise, noticing the blonde and giving him a measuring glance. "That's good I guess. More hands to help me. My mom said that we need to repot the roses and petunias, and there are tons of them, so there's no way I can get them done by myself. Come inside and help." She gestured wildly. As she and Sakura walked forward, they abruptly stopped, seeing as Naruto wasn't following them. Ino's face grew apologetic. "Oh, my mom's not here at the moment. I'm really sorry for what I said before. I wasn't really thinking. I mean, it's weird that my mom doesn't like you even though she hasn't met you. I asked my dad about it and he said that there's nothing wrong with you, so I guess you're okay. As long as mom isn't here, that is." "Oh," Naruto replied after a short silence. "Is it still okay for me to come in then?" "Definitely," Ino answered, flipping her hair. "My dad's fine with you, remember? As long as my mom doesn't find out. It's so weird that she has such a grudge against." "Hey, what are you looking at?" she demanded forcefully, scowling. Startled, Sakura and Naruto followed Ino's gaze as she glared at a man across the street. "He's looking at us weirdly," Ino explained before sticking out her tongue. "Leave us alone, creep," she called as the man turned away. Naruto tried to contain his rising panic. The man wasn't glaring at them, he was glaring at him. It seemed that Sakura and Ino were still oblivious to his usual treatment. He had actually been lucky that morning with Sakura, since no one had gone out of their way to be cruel to him. He figured that those who hated him were either used to his presence in the village, or didn't want to get involved with Sakura as well. For her part, Sakura had been pretty focused on her goal and wasn't really paying attention to her surroundings and those shooting Naruto some less than friendly looks. Thanks to that, Naruto had escaped unscathed, though now fear bubbled so intensely in his stomach that he felt nauseous. The moment passed, however, as Ino rolled her eyes and ushered them inside without another word on the matter. As they walked through the door, Naruto felt like he had physically walked into a wall of smells. It was so sweet that it was almost disgusting, and Naruto had to stop and take some deep breaths to become accustomed to it. He glanced up when he heard giggling. "I forgot how some people react when they first enter our shop," Ino commented, hiding her grin behind her hand. "I guess I'm just used to it by now." "Alright," she clapped her hands together. "Let's get working. Oh, and be careful of the thorns, they're sharp. I would give you gloves, but there's only one pair small enough, so I'll let Sakura use them." "Okay, Naruto?" With a nod, Naruto quickly found himself drafted into repotting plants, and not long after he decided that it wasn't a very fun task. Even though Ino gave him an apron, he still felt like he was getting dirt all over the clothes Iruka had worked so hard to buy him. It was also tricky to be gentle with the flowers, as Ino continually yelled at him to not pull so hard, or to be careful to not crinkle the leaves and to not touch the petals. As the three performed this menial labor, Naruto was also struck with an interesting observation. It seemed that the girls weren't working as hard as he was because they insisted on talking. And talking. And talking some more. Reflecting on his time with Shikamaru and Choji, he couldn't help but notice a key difference. When he was with them, they often lapsed into comfortable silences, having exhausted all possible topics of conversation. But these girls had endless things to talk about. One second they could be discussing clothes, and then the next their favorite ice cream toppings. Was there anything they didn't discuss? What was the point of talking about everything? Naruto was so wrapped up his thoughts that he wasn't watching what he was doing. Suddenly, he hissed in pain as a thorn sliced open a tiny cut on his finger. "Oh no, are you okay?" Ino asked. Sakura just looked faint as beads of blood appeared. "I am fine," Naruto stammered. "I hate when that happens," Ino continued. "Let me get you a bandage." "And no, it's okay. I don't need one." Ino stopped short. "Huh?" She and Sakura's eyes grew huge as Naruto held up his finger and showed them that the cut and blood had miraculously disappeared. "How did you do that?" Ino demanded, recovering first as Sakura simply blinked in amazement. "I've always been able to do it," Naruto murmured in a small voice. Iruka had told him that his ability to heal quickly was unusual, and that he should try not to broadcast it. Unfortunately, by this point it was too late, and Naruto was starting to feel that fear well up within him again. For some reason, the fear was tinged with annoyance. He was angry at himself for fearing that they wouldn't accept him for being different. He had never experienced such frustration at his instinctive reaction before, although he knew where it came from. Since nearly everyone had been open to his strangeness lately, it seemed that fear was pointless. All his friends stood testament to that. Why should he constantly be afraid? Despite this new feeling, he couldn't deny his anxiety as doubt laced his frustration. Sakura and Ino had been silent for a few moments now after their continuous chattering from before, and that was worrisome. It wasn't like them to be quiet. He braced himself for their rejection, and began to fumble with the ties on the apron. I wish I could have that ability, Ino spoke up suddenly with a wistful tone. I mean, that's amazing. She gasped in realization. Is that why my mom doesn't like you? When I was younger, I got really sick and she wanted me to get better really fast, but I didn't. Is she jealous of you? 'Cause you're kinda different. You have lines on your face and you can heal really fast. Is that the reason? Naruto found he couldn't process what she was saying, so he gave an ambiguous, meek response. Wow, have you ever tested it? Ino continued, as Naruto stared at his feet, mumbling that he hadn't. Sakura couldn't help but notice an odd glint in her friend's eyes. Ino, she whispered, somehow frightened. Ino didn't hear her and plowed on. The family has always researched flowers and their medicinal properties, but we've never found one that can heal people so quickly and cleanly. I mean, it's like your cut never existed. Wow, she blew out a breath, her energy evaporating as she collapsed against the countertop. She laughed thinly. Guess I got a little carried away there. Sorry, Naruto, she apologized, grimacing. I always say too much. Naruto attempted a weak smile, rather relieved that her tirade had ended. So, Sakura, what we're talking about. I'm not kidding when I say we need to get back to work. They need to be done before my mom gets back. Sakura found that she didn't have quite the same passion for talking that she did before. Something about the frenzy in Ino's eyes unnerved her deeply. Perhaps she was just being too sensitive, as usual. When they heard the sound of a door opening, Naruto was quick to depart, not wanting to get caught. Before Ino's mother, Hanako, appeared, Sakura hurriedly leaned over to Ino. I wouldn't mention it to your mom, she advised. Mention what? Ino wondered. You know? Sakura hedged. Oh, yeah, of course. Something about Ino's tone made Sakura narrow her eyes suspiciously, although she wiped that expression off her face as Hanako came to investigate their progress. Even though a smile graced her features, Sakura, for one, was not so easily fooled by the Yamanaka woman's calculating gaze as she noted 3 work areas and only 2 workers. Still, she continued to smile as if nothing was amiss. Finally, Hanako suppressed her emotions and relaxed, easing into a light conversation. Even though Ino said nothing about Naruto's presence, Sakura couldn't help but feel that the woman knew. She was also aware that Ino had some flaws, and gossiping was sadly one of them, especially if her mother was involved. Secrets did not remain secrets for long when Ino was around. When Sakura finally left, she pleasantly waved goodbye and silently headed back to her home. For some reason, she felt uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. Despite Ino's and Sakura's weirdness in comparison to Shikamaru and Choji, Naruto found himself immensely enjoying the time he spent with them. When he wasn't playing with Shikamaru and Choji, he was with Sakura and Ino, and vice versa. He couldn't believe that he was able to make even more friends, for even Ino was growing on him. Although she often stuck her foot in her mouth, as Shikamaru would say, Naruto couldn't help but grow warm at her sincere smiles and kind words. She usually apologized for saying something wrong, which really dashed any pretense of cruelty Naruto might have sensed in her. She wasn't intentionally mean, she just did not think before she spoke. Despite this, Naruto grew to care for her, especially since he really liked Sakura and Ino was Sakura's oldest friend. Though, he did cherish the moments he had alone with Sakura, for she was more sensitive and gentle than the Yamanaka, which Naruto was far better equipped to handle. As their friendship grew and he had more time to spend with them, they began to branch out and wander Konoha, creating some problems for Naruto. One thing that still made him anxious was their increasing awareness of his treatment by the villagers. From what he could tell, it made Sakura embarrassed and confused, while Ino just seemed to assume a mixture of intrigue and animosity. Oftentimes, she told off some of Naruto's worst perpetrators, though she would occasionally mumble something to herself afterwards that related to her mother's perceptions. Out of all of his friends, Ino seemed the most curious as to why Naruto was treated the way he was. While she did straightforwardly ask him about it, Naruto could only meekly explain he didn't know the reason himself, which strangely incited Ino even more. After some time, she became convinced that it was Naruto's healing ability that made him different and freakish in the minds of the villagers, whom she proclaimed were just jealous. It made Naruto uncomfortable whenever she brought it up, since it was not a secret he wanted divulged to everyone. He didn't know what would happen if some particularly cruel attacker wanted revenge on him and knew that he could heal. How far would the man go? How much could Naruto take? These thoughts always made him shudder, and luckily Sakura was sensitive to this, so she constantly diverted their conversations away from such a touchy subject. Naruto couldn't help but be very grateful for this and made sure to give Sakura an extra special smile when he could to show her his appreciation. Lately, for some odd reason, his smiles to her made her turn her face away from him, and he wasn't sure why. All he did know was that it made his insides flutter peculiarly. It seemed that Naruto should have no time left for anything but training and spending time with his friends. But there was one more thought that dominated his mind at odd moments. It always started with an unpleasant memory and then a quick reminder of a tragedy. Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke was never far from his mind, no matter how hard Naruto tried to bury thoughts of him. The boy had wounded him deeply, and yet there was still a connection between them despite his outright rejection. Naruto couldn't explain it, but he felt such empathy for Sasuke that sometimes it made his chest hurt. Thinking of Sasuke always brought back memories of his own life, and he couldn't help but reflect on where he might be without his precious people. And as far as he knew, Sasuke was still alone. He had witnessed it, in fact, when he traveled with Iruka to the market to buy groceries a little over a week after their first encounter. It was on this very day that Naruto decided once and for all to initiate his plan. Bring on the tomatoes. Naruto and Iruka were wandering through the open-air market, eyeing potential produce. Not wanting to be a bother, Naruto clung closely to Iruka, though he knew that only caused nastier looks in their direction. Fortunately, Iruka was above their scorn and carried on normally, showing Naruto which vegetables to pick, and explaining what some of them were. What's that weird purple one? Is it a giant, mutated bean? No, that's an eggplant, Naruto. The couple was having a marvelous time, though some of the vendors hawked outrageous prices seeing that Naruto was there. Instead of getting angry at them though, Iruka always smiled pleasantly and pointedly walked to another merchant selling the same thing. Apparently, vendors didn't take too kindly to losing business to a rival, so the stigma attached to Naruto quickly vanished in the exchange of money from one hand to another. It was essentially a game that Naruto and Iruka played as they laughed together over the pettiness of a few disgruntled salesmen. During those treasured moments, Naruto always forgot that he was the village pariah, the one supposed to be hated and abused. Instead, he felt like he and his father were playing some good-natured pranks and getting away with them. It was thrilling and wonderful, and it warmed Naruto to the heart every time Iruka winked at him, knowing the sale was in the bag. Things changed when they arrived at a booth selling cabbages. While Iruka skillfully haggled with the vendor, Naruto idly gazed around, careful not to touch anything in the process. It was then that he noticed a newcomer to the market, and he was not the only one. All eyes seemingly turned toward the conspicuously alone raven-haired boy who simply pretended to be unaware of the attention focused on him and the picture of a fan on his back. Then it began, the whispering. Naruto watched as the boy shrank slightly, almost imperceptible except to those who understood. And Naruto intimately understood. No matter how quiet the whispers were, you could never be oblivious to them, never oblivious to the shooting glances that sliced through the air. Sasuke knew it, too. Naruto watched as Sasuke steadfastly assumed a blank, nearly indifferent expression. Ah, so he had a mask as well. This one was stronger than Naruto's, since the emotions behind it were so well honed. It remained stony as each hushed word assaulted him, as each person drew up in shock at witnessing the last survivor of the Uchiha clan. No cracks appeared even when an old grandmother blurted aloud how sad it was that this boy was all alone. Naruto was impressed with Sasuke's performance, but it wasn't flawless. He saw Sasuke's knees tremble slightly, and his shoulders slump further as time progressed. Was he the only one who truly saw? Even Iruka was looking at Sasuke now, distracted from his purchase when the whole area quieted at the boy's arrival. As Naruto gazed up at Iruka's face, he realized that the man did not quite see all that was happening, all that Sasuke was hiding. Only Naruto could read the underlying sadness, rage and fear pent up inside of him. And suddenly, Naruto realized why. He was staring at himself. For the first time since he could remember, no one was looking at him, deriding him, belittling him with their vicious words. All attention was devoted to a new outsider. This one may not have been hated, but instead he would endure perhaps a worse fate. He would be pitied. He would be seen as different because of the tragedy he had undergone. He would be discussed in quiet undertones in voices of haughtiness, voices who thought they understood and knew what was best for him. But they were pompous and, most importantly, they were wrong. They knew nothing. They were ignorant of everything but their own comfortable lives. They had never experienced suffering, were never the center of attention when they wanted only to crawl into a ball and hide from everything. They had never felt pain, been hurt so badly that it seemed like the world would stop functioning if they closed their eyes and wished for death. They had never been so completely and utterly alone that even shadows were comforting. They didn't know. They couldn't possibly know. But Naruto did. He knew, and that realization made his chest swell so that he couldn't breathe. His heart seized and then beat rapidly as Sasuke's dull eyes surveyed the surroundings and then stopped on the cart next to the one with cabbages. He did not even acknowledge Naruto's presence as he selected a large quantity of tomatoes, paid the awestruck vendor and glided out of sight like a phantom. Even in his wake the marketplace remained subdued, as if his existence still lingered like a pall, oppressive mist. Then everything returned to normal. Voices barked, babies cried, women laughed. It was as if nothing had happened, and yet to Naruto, everything had happened. Iruka turned back to the cabbage merchant and villagers continued on their journeys through town. Only Naruto remained frozen, rooted in place by a powerful grip, but of what? Was it still empathy? Sympathy? Naruto didn't know anything except that he needed to try to befriend Sasuke again, repeatedly if necessary. In fact, he wouldn't give up until the other boy relented. It was as if in that moment, that long and slow moment, the universe had told Naruto it had a mission for him, that he owed it for his current happiness. And this was how he would repay his debt. Iruka, can we buy some tomatoes next? Naruto figured that the best way to get through to Sasuke was with food. That was how he had first made friends with Ramen Ojii-san and Ramen Oni-san, after all. Sasuke was still human, and Naruto thought that he wouldn't be able to resist his offers of food, not after persistent efforts. He did appear to like tomatoes an awful lot, if the huge quantity he had bought was any indication. Naruto started the next day when he hastily grabbed a tomato and headed out the door. He found Sasuke sitting again at the dock where they had first met each other. Not for the first time, he wondered about the academy's hours, and if Sasuke simply skipped classes to be here. The latter seemed most likely, considering that he was a reputed genius and no instructor in their right mind would deny the last surviving Uchiha whatever he wanted. Just thinking about it angered Naruto a bit, as he thought of Sasuke taking advantage of his status. Then again, Naruto wasn't sure he wouldn't do the same in Sasuke's position. He decided to dash those thoughts out of his mind and concentrate on his mission. As he stealthily approached Sasuke, he was a little disappointed that the Uchiha noticed him. Apparently his ninja skills weren't quite up to par yet. I thought I told you to leave me alone, freak, Sasuke hissed, not bothering to even look at Naruto as he spoke such cruel words. Naruto willed himself to not react. Here, he said instead, holding out a tomato. Sasuke glanced at him quickly and scoffed in disbelief. What? Here, I brought it for you. It's a gift. Are you joking? What the hell? I got it for you, Naruto repeated. Sasuke shook his head at the ridiculousness of it all. That's stupid. Why would you even think of something so idiotic? I don't want your stupid tomato. Fine, Naruto said aloofly. He calmly walked forward and set the tomato down on the dock next to Sasuke. What are you, deaf? I don't want your stupid tomato. But even as Sasuke said this, his eyes did not leave the fruit sitting next to him, and Naruto noticed with satisfaction that he didn't fling it off the dock. It was a start. Enjoy it, Naruto called over his shoulder as he turned to walk away. He felt pounding vibrations as Sasuke leapt to his feet and no doubt glared after him. I said I don't want your stupid tomato. Sasuke spat furiously. Then don't take it, Naruto answered indifferently. Sasuke gritted his teeth. You probably poisoned it anyways, he shouted. At this, Naruto spun on his heel and eyed Sasuke pointedly. But isn't poisoning a tomato hard to do? How would an idiot like me know how to do that? With that, Naruto left Sasuke with his mouth agape and his whole body visibly trembling with rage and confusion. He smiled to himself. Day 1. Success. Unfortunately, day 2 didn't work as well. Sasuke seemed so convinced that Naruto was playing mind games with him that the instant Naruto set the tomato down, Sasuke picked it up and hurled it into the water, sneering as Naruto tried to keep the disappointment off his face. Day 3 wasn't much better, as Sasuke repeated his earlier actions and grew so annoyed at Naruto's presence that he vilified him more than he had ever done so before. As Naruto left, he found that, this time, he was the one trembling with hurt and sadness. By day 5, Iruka was getting suspicious of Naruto's escapades and strange mood swings. He tried to coax the information out of him, but Naruto was reluctant to share, wanting to completely succeed before he let Iruka know. In the meantime, he wouldn't give up. He was determined to get through to Sasuke. Day 7 brought about a change, and also a strange confrontation. For one, instead of reacting to Naruto's presence, Sasuke simply ignored him. He refused to respond to Naruto's words, and pretended that he didn't exist. Even as Naruto inched away, Sasuke didn't move. He neither touched nor threw away the tomato beside him. As Naruto journeyed back to Konoha, he couldn't help but ponder over Sasuke's odd behavior. Did this mean he was making some progress? Naruto was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he almost didn't realize that he was about to walk into someone. He snapped out of it just before the collision, but before he could escape, the person glanced up and saw him. "Naruto?" rang a sweet voice. Naruto felt his heart hammering in his chest. She had such a striking resemblance to Ino that he instantly knew who she was. He involuntarily took a step backward. "Don't be afraid, dear," Hanako implored him. "I was actually looking for you." She smiled at him. "I wanted to thank you for helping my daughter a little while ago." Naruto's throat was so dry he couldn't manage a sound. Not to mention the fact that he was face to face with a woman whom everyone had claimed hated him. Stranger yet, she was acting nice to him. Naruto didn't know what to think. His brain was locked. "I actually meant to talk to you, Naruto. Would you mind coming with me for a short walk?" Naruto nodded mutely, trying to decide whether or not he should run or obey her. He quickly peeked at her eyes and found that he couldn't quite read them. Was she being sincere? He scanned her person, attempting to determine if she had any weapons she could use against him. All she was carrying in her hand was a basket with some fruit and vegetables inside covered with a small towel. Was anything else concealed? "It's all right," she assured him. She reached out as if to touch him, then seemed to think better of it. Naruto figured she didn't want to frighten him as she quickly withdrew her hand. "Won't you come?" Naruto swallowed and then acquiesced, tamely following the Yamanaka woman as they walked back through town. Naruto felt his breathing grow rapid as she ushered them into an alley, but then it emerged into a field of bright yellow flowers. Naruto tried not to get distracted by the scene, but it was a beautiful sight, and Hanako appeared equally delighted. "Come, let's sit. I just wanted to get away from the village for a moment." "Careful," she abruptly admonished as Naruto almost crushed a flower. Naruto froze, his body quaking fearfully, as Hanako hurriedly tried to cover her mistake. "I'm sorry. Flowers are just very dear to me." Naruto meekly accepted this explanation and carefully sat down across from the woman, shyly avoiding her gaze. "I brought you here because this place calms me. And I need calm for what I'm about to do," she said, her voice a bit strained. Naruto braced himself. "I wanted to apologize to you, Naruto." Naruto gasped in surprise and stared up at her without thinking. Hanako smiled thinly. "Yes, I truly do. You've been such a good friend to Ino, and I really wanted to apologize for my behavior. I realize that you've gotten a certain impression of me, and I just wanted to explain myself. You see, Naruto, like you, I was an orphan," she spoke in a tight tone. "I feared that if I saw you, or came near you, that I would be reminded of all the pain I experienced as a child. Do you understand?" Naruto gazed at her in wonder, abruptly feeling ashamed that he had been so afraid of her. "I understand," he murmured timidly. Hanako smiled sadly. "I thought you would. It was very hard for me to lose my parents." Her voice grew choked up and she had to pause a moment before she could continue. "I didn't know how to explain my feelings to Ino. As smart as she is, I'm afraid that she just wouldn't be able to understand, having not experienced such a thing. I believe I also spoke rashly to her, which is what gave her the false impression of me that she passed on to you. I am truly sorry for everything, and I hope you can forgive me." Hanako bowed her head, hiding her face from Naruto. Naruto was touched by this gesture, briefly wondering how he could have been so mistaken about Ino's mother. "I forgive you," he said softly, smiling unsurely as Hanako raised her head and he saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Naruto. And I want you to know that you are welcome in my home anytime. I'm sure my daughter would appreciate the help." Naruto nodded, overjoyed. "Thank you, Hanako-san." Hanako beamed back at him before suddenly crying out. "Oh my," she breathed as she held aloft the towel of her basket, which she had been wringing so fiercely with her hands that it was all wrinkled. She exhaled slowly, laughing gently. "I guess I got a bit emotional there." Naruto just giggled in response. That night, as he related his meeting with Hanako to Iruka, Naruto was fairly bouncing around the kitchen. "She was so nice. I feel so bad for thinking things about her." Iruka frowned thoughtfully. "It's not your fault, Naruto. I had misgivings too. Is something wrong, Iruka?" Iruka was silent for a moment before shaking his head. "No, I guess not. Just make sure you don't overstay your welcome at the Yamanakas," he warned. "I won't," Naruto promised as he skipped into his room to practice reading. Iruka stared after him, the frown still on his face. At last he sighed and relaxed, shrugging. "Whatever," he said to himself as he trailed after Naruto. "We haven't seen each other in forever and you're late?" Shikamaru demanded as Naruto trotted up their favorite hill outside of Konoha. Choji was already there, lounging next to Shikamaru as the Nara finally decided he was exerting too much effort and lay back on the grass. "Meh, whatever. What were you doing, Naruto?" Choji spoke up, offering him some potato chips which Naruto gladly accepted. As he lay down in his spot, he answered, crunching thoughtfully. "I just had something to do," he hedged. The others decided not to pursue the subject, so Naruto was left to his own thoughts for a moment. That morning, things had not gone well with Sasuke. The Uchiha still insisted on ignoring him, making Naruto wonder if he was getting anywhere. At this point, it seemed he was regressing. He almost wished Sasuke would go back to yelling at him, for at least it was some kind of reaction. Naruto knew that it would take Sasuke a while to be able to trust anyone again, so he figured he could wait. But how long would this take? He knew he wouldn't give up, but he was starting to lose hope. What if Sasuke never came around? Sighing, he decided to stop thinking of these serious things and focus on the positive. For one, he was spending time with Choji and Shikamaru, which he hadn't done in a while. For another, they were peacefully cloud-gazing, which always made Naruto happy. "So, how is training going for you guys?" Choji brought up innocently. Shikamaru groaned. "Don't remind me. It's so boring and, blah. My dad is a serious crazy person." Naruto and Choji laughed. "Your dad's not crazy." Naruto giggled. "Not when you're around," Shikamaru insisted. "But alone he is like, I am a ninja, and you will be a ninja, so you must listen to me if you want to become anything to this village." "That sounds about right," Choji agreed. "Although my dad's always been like that." "Is Iruka crazy to you, Naruto?" Shikamaru asked. "No, he's really awesome. Yesterday, he taught me this really cool stance and said that if I master it, no one can knock me over." "Have you mastered it yet?" "Nope, I got knocked over," Naruto admitted sheepishly as they all laughed. "But I've been practicing every day." "Every day?" Shikamaru sounded dismayed. "I am really not looking forward to going to the academy. If the teacher's lectures are as boring as my dad's, I'm definitely going to fall asleep in class." "We'll just have to wake you up then," Naruto said. "Or we could have Ino do it. She talks loud enough to be like an alarm clock." Choji giggled. "That's for sure." Shikamaru rolled his eyes. "Speaking of Ino, Naruto, I hear you've been hanging out with her a lot lately." Naruto's insides squirmed a bit, not wanting his friends to judge him. "Well, yeah, she's actually not so bad when you get to know her. Besides, Sakura's there too." "Sakura?" Choji repeated. Shikamaru gasped and flipped onto his belly to give Naruto a knowing smile and wink. "I think you have a crush on Sakura," he said in a sing-song voice. Naruto was horrified. "No I don't." Choji and Shikamaru exchanged glances before bursting into song. "Naruto and Sakura, sitting in a tree. No, it's not like that." Naruto interrupted fiercely, blushing hotly. "Sakura is just really nice and Ino is too. I like spending time with them, that's all." The boys gave Naruto a break as Shikamaru smirked. Alright, I just don't envy you spending time with Ino of all people. But at least she's being nice to you." Yeah, and her mom is really nice too, Naruto added, filling them in on his and Hanako's encounter. Wow, that's really great, Naruto. Choji agreed, beaming at his friend. Huh, I never would have thought that, Shikamaru remarked. He shrugged. Whatever. I have been known to be wrong sometimes. Or all the time, Choji cut in, laughing as Naruto joined him. Shikamaru was not amused. Hey, that's not very nice. Whatever happened to my nice friend Choji? He turned into a big, Akamichi ninja. Choji laughed. Great, Shikamaru muttered sarcastically, then feigned dramatics. Well, Naruto, I guess it's just you and me now. Nope, sorry Shikamaru, but I'm going to be a ninja too. Maybe even Hokage. So you're both going to abandon me? Shikamaru said in a fake, choked-up voice. Some friends you are. Ah, Shikamaru, we'll never abandon you, Choji said, suddenly serious. Not ever, Naruto added sincerely. There was an uncomfortably emotional silence that followed before Shikamaru spoke up. And I'll never leave you guys either. S3, we'll be great. Yeah, Choji and Naruto chorused, returning their gazes to the sky. Naruto stared down at the dock forlornly. What would Sasuke be like today? Naruto steeled himself for the worst as he approached. At first, Naruto thought Sasuke was employing the same ignorance as he had been for the past several days. Then, all of a sudden, as Naruto turned away, there came a dead voice. Why are you doing this? Naruto stopped dead in his tracks. Why? Sasuke sounded defeated, exhausted. What do you want? Naruto slowly turned around to find Sasuke still staring out at the water with slumped shoulders. I want to be your friend. There was a pause. Then, my friend? He repeated in disbelief. You want to be my friend? Yes. Sasuke swiveled around to face him, his eyes glaring suspiciously. Why? Because I know what it's like to be alone, Naruto answered truthfully, not backing down from Sasuke's calculating gaze. Do you pity me? Sasuke sneered, leaping to his feet. I thought I told you I didn't want your pity. That I wanted to be left alone. You are alone. At these cold words, Sasuke gave a strangled sob. You think you know me, but you have no idea. How can you possibly think you understand what I'm going through? Because I'm Uzumaki Naruto. He didn't need to explain himself. His name stood for everything. Sasuke was fighting strong emotions. He nearly looked on the verge of tears, though he stubbornly refused to let them fall. I don't need anyone, especially not you. I don't need any friends. I just need, his voice trailed off hopelessly as he sank to his knees and buried his face in his hands. Naruto slowly put a comforting hand on the trembling Uchiha's shoulder, but wasn't expecting to be violently thrown aside. This was so unexpected that Naruto lost his balance and tumbled off the side of the dock and into the water. He didn't get a chance to breathe before he plunged beneath the surface, gulping water. He thrashed with his hands, desperate to reach the surface, but it was so far away and he was sinking quickly. He was painfully reminded of his inability to swim, and now he was about to die. His flailing only served to make him sink faster. He couldn't breathe. His lungs burned, his eyes burned. The shimmering water above him seemed to blur before his eyes as darkness descended, but not before a strange sensation erupted in his belly. It was a feeling of utter desperation and despair, but also of fierce rage and frustration. A haze of red tinged the shadow of his vision as Naruto felt himself losing consciousness. Then, out of nowhere, there was a hand and a face. The hand grabbed his shirt and yanked hard, dragging him up from the depths. Naruto broke the surface with a gasp, but was too weak to help as the nameless savior pulled him up onto the dock and then collapsed beside him, heaving tiredly. Naruto breathed sweet oxygen as he coughed up water, spitting it out as he rolled onto his side clutching at his stomach. Those strange emotions he had felt before were gone, for which Naruto was grateful. They had scared him because he didn't know their origins. Where had they come from? You stupid idiot, came a breathless voice, jarring him out of his musings. Naruto blinked vapidly and saw Sasuke's face float into existence before him, his black hair hanging about his face and dripping wet. How can you not know how to swim, moron? From that moment on, Naruto considered Sasuke his friend, and although the Uchiha would never admit it, he had crossed the line into friendship the instant he decided to pull Naruto out of the water. The first few days of their friendship were interesting, to say the least, and quite a bit awkward for Sasuke. Although some deep, remote part of him did consider Naruto his friend, he found that he couldn't voice that sentiment out loud. He kept telling himself that he was allowing Naruto to spend time with him because the blonde was indebted to him for saving his life, and he was honor-bound to such a contract. However, as time passed, he found himself increasingly looking forward to Naruto's company if not to distract him from his loneliness. The blonde was always so annoyingly cheerful that Sasuke couldn't help but forget his morose thoughts and for once concentrate on the present. Left to his own, his thoughts would only swirl to the past and the future, and the strength he would need to avenge his clan by killing his brother. Naruto's brightness provided a welcome respite from dark considerations. One day, they had convened as usual on the dock. So far, they hadn't ventured anywhere, since Naruto had sensed Sasuke's reluctance to such an activity. To appease him and not aggravate their new relationship, Naruto was fine to simply dangle his legs over the edge of the dock and prattle on about anything and everything. At times he paused for Sasuke's input, which was growing each day. Naruto was very satisfied with his new friend's progress, if hearing his voice was any indication. In the beginning, Sasuke had said nothing at all, so now to hear him at least mutter a quick word or two made his heart soar. Naruto also realized something strange. He had told Sasuke more than he had told any of his other friends combined. Even though they had only had a few conversations, mostly one-sided, Naruto had broached topics he was too afraid to go into with the others, even Iruka. He didn't know why being around Sasuke loosened his tongue, but it made him feel good to get certain things off his chest. Although he knew Sasuke wasn't scornful of these deep, personal revelations, for the Uchiha usually just listened and made no comment on these subjects. Naruto made sure to also include lighter material. Like ramen, Naruto could speak endlessly about the delights of ramen, and was so enraptured in his descriptions that he jumped when Sasuke fiercely interrupted. "Moron, stop talking about ramen already. You make it sound like food from the gods, and it definitely isn't." Naruto pretended to be offended. "What? How could you say that? Have you ever even tried ramen, idiot?" Sasuke sniffed. "No, though it sounds to me like you've never eaten anything else in your life. You have no base for comparison." "Yes I do, but once you've had ramen, you can't go back," Naruto swore passionately. Sasuke rolled his eyes. "Yeah right." Naruto leapt to his feet. "I can prove it. Let's go to Ichiraku's right now." After Sasuke didn't reply, Naruto added, "I did invite you a while ago, and you can't keep putting it off. You've got to come." Suddenly, Sasuke assumed a malicious grin and began to cackle. Naruto was taken aback. "Sasuke?" he asked nervously. "I think we should go to Ichiraku's." He began to cackle again, though as his face lightened, the cackle gradually became deriding laughter. Naruto was relieved at this, if only that it was laughter at all. "Why did you change your mind?" Sasuke's grin became accentuated by a spark that had long been missing from his eyes. "I was just picturing people's faces when we're seen together," he explained, his voice abruptly cutting off as he laughed scathingly. Naruto paused to think about it and then returned Sasuke's Cheshire grin, picturing the revulsion on some of the villagers' faces. Sasuke, the golden boy with the village pariah? The scandal, the outrage, reactions would be priceless. This should be good. Sasuke smirked as he stood and the pair headed into Konoha. Tucci had seen many odd things in his life, but was never more surprised when his favorite customer arrived with none other than the Uchiha boy beside him, both clutching their sides and biting back laughter. The sight was more unnerving than he cared to admit, though his unease abated slightly at seeing their utter mirth. He knew that both boys certainly deserved happiness in their lives after what they had been through, but he had never thought that they would find happiness in each other. Of all the friendships in the world, this had to be the most puzzling. Did you see that guy staring at us, with his mouth wide open? He was just standing there, staring, and then almost got run over." Naruto was laughing breathlessly as the two mounted respective barstools. "I personally liked the old woman whose expression went from confusion to anger so quickly that her face turned purple." Sasuke added, his smile dropping once he noticed Tucci eyeing them curiously. Naruto turned to the old man and beamed. "Ramen Ojii-san. I brought another friend today. This is Uchiha Sasuke." Sasuke nodded curtly in greeting even as he muttered, "Idiot," under his breath, seeing his introductions were clearly unnecessary. "It's nice to meet you, Sasuke." I'm Tucci. Tucci introduced himself, though he faltered when he wasn't quite sure what to say next. He was luckily saved by his daughter, who burst through the back smiling. Did I hear Naruto or am I wrong? Oh, Naruto. Great to see you. And you must be. Ayame's words cut off as she paused to collect herself. Uchiha Sasuke, am I right? I've heard of you, though I was never told how cute you were. Ramen Oni-chan. Naruto groaned. Beside him, Sasuke blushed fiercely. He had been called many things since the incident, but never cute. How mortifying. To cover his embarrassment, he quickly assumed his characteristic smirk, keeping his eyes low and his expression dark. Ayame simply grinned wickedly, glad to see a reaction. She smiled brighter as her father gave her a warning glare which she promptly ignored. So, what are your orders today, boys? She asked pleasantly. Miso and beef ramen for both of us. Naruto answered immediately. You too? Sasuke tried to look bored. Sure, maybe if I finally try some Naruto we'll stop talking about it. Never. Naruto vowed. Ramen is my favorite thing in the world. I could never stop talking about it. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Great, he muttered darkly, though Naruto didn't sense any true hostility in his tone. You'll love it, I know it, Naruto said gleefully, grinning exuberantly at Sasuke, who simply harumphed in reply. So, how's your training coming along, Naruto? Ayame asked as her father went to fill out the orders. It turned out that Naruto and Sasuke were the only occupants that afternoon, though Tucci perfectly understood why. It would be far too bizarre to sit in a restaurant where Sasuke and Naruto chatted away amiably with each other. Not to mention really uncomfortable. Looking back on it, Tucci could sympathize with his fellow villagers' reactions, no matter how peculiar they might have been. My training's going great, Naruto chattered. I get up early every day and practice with Iruka before he goes to work, and I think I'm really getting better. Though there are some things I'm having trouble with. Hey Sasuke, maybe you could help me with them? You're in the academy, right? I was. Naruto frowned. Ayame took this as her cue to exit into the back, not wanting to really intrude upon their conversation and knowing that Sasuke would be guarded around her. What do you mean that you were in the academy? Don't you still go every day? Sasuke scoffed. Are you an idiot? What, you thought they were letting me skip classes so I could sit on the dock all day long? The Hokage granted me a leave of absence since, he trailed off and Naruto swallowed unsurely. Oh, but you were in the academy? Didn't you get in when you turned 6? Sasuke nodded petulantly. Yeah, moron. Tucci sucked in a breath, not liking where Sasuke had taken their conversation. How dare he insult Naruto? How utterly rude of him. It didn't matter who he was. Tucci wouldn't stand for that. He was about to cut in when Naruto spoke up gently, seemingly determined to not let Sasuke's barb affect him. Then you know some really cool techniques, I bet? Sasuke gazed at him, though Naruto was staring down at the counter. He felt somewhat bad that he had reacted so bluntly, but he found he couldn't apologize. Of course I learned some cool techniques, he stated coldly. Naruto let a smile creep onto his face as he turned to eye Sasuke excitedly. Will you teach me? Sasuke took in his eagerness and bright face. No. Naruto was unperturbed. Come on, please? Pretty please? I'll keep talking about ramen, he finally threatened. No. Ramen noodles are delicious when they are strung in such a way, and the broth has to have special spices in it to make it really good. So good that you'll never. Fine. Sasuke cut him short. I'll teach you some moves. But it's only because I have nothing better to do anyways. Naruto cheered as Tucci shook his head, smiling. Boy, that Uzumaki kid was something else. When their orders arrived, Naruto immediately dove into his bowl, zealously slurping down the contents. He stopped suddenly and decided to watch Sasuke try his first bite. The Uchiha picked at his bowl unsurely and then sighed, aware of Naruto's penetrating gaze. He gingerly took his first bite and then tipped the bowl into his mouth for a bit of the broth, letting it stay in his mouth a moment before he swallowed. Naruto held his breath anxiously. Sasuke was still as he absorbed the taste, though he made no indication of how he felt. At last, Naruto couldn't take his silence anymore. Well? He demanded. When Sasuke didn't reply, he increased the intensity of his voice. Well? Sasuke relished in Naruto's fretfulness before answering slowly. It's good. I knew it. Naruto erupted. I knew you'd like it. Sasuke rolled his eyes, though there was a slight grin on his face as he took another bite. When both boys were finished, they paid for their meals and stood to leave. Tucci thanked them for their business and told them to come again, though this was automatic. Inside, he was reflecting on what an interesting pair they made. Interesting, yet, somehow, compatible. He couldn't quite explain his feelings on the matter, though after witnessing their interaction firsthand, he couldn't help but feel that their friendship was not a mistake. Maybe they were just what each other needed, by some odd, far-fetched miracle. Naruto was smiling happily to himself as he made his way to the Yamanakas. Although Sasuke had vehemently declined his invitation to the flower shop, Naruto honestly felt as though he had made a huge leap in breaking the shell Sasuke had erected around himself. It made him feel so giddy that he practically skipped to the Yamanakas, ignoring the looks he got from passers-by. He didn't care at all what people thought of him. He had a new friend who was slowly but surely opening up to him. Naruto felt his happiness fade slightly as he entered the Yamanaka establishment and bumped into Ino immediately, who informed him that Sakura wouldn't be joining them. At that moment, when he registered his disappointment at Sakura's absence, the teasing song Shikamaru and Choji had sung to him rushed back to his mind, causing him to flush. Naruto and Sakura, sitting in a tree. Did he really have a crush on Sakura? Suddenly the thought horrified him, and he had to steadfastly assure himself that it wasn't true. No way. He definitely did not like Sakura like that. She was a girl. So what if she was pretty and nice and… No crush here. Naruto, are you okay? You look like you have a fever, Ino voiced up in concern, noting Naruto's very red face. No, I'm fine, he strained through gritted teeth. Ino gazed at him questioningly and then nodded. Oh, okay. One of those quick, amazing, healy things, right? Got it. Sure, Naruto answered, not really paying attention. He was too busy trying to quell his madly swirling thoughts. Ino, sweetie? Came a pleasant voice. Hanako appeared around the corner with a smile on her face that dropped slightly when she saw Naruto. She quickly shook her head and beamed at him as he snapped out of his mood and respectfully greeted her. Hello, Hanako-san. Ah, I didn't know you were coming over. I guess it's a good thing today, though. I did want some help baking. Mom's making cookies, Ino explained. Wanna help? From what Naruto could smell, that seemed like a very good idea. He nodded eagerly and followed the Yamanakas into the kitchen where all kinds of baking utensils were laid out. Ino directed him to a cutting board upon which some cookie dough had been rolled flat. She showed him how to make the cookies into different shapes with cookie cutters, and then how to decorate them with candies and sprinkles. Throughout all of this, she babbled on about nothing in particular. So then I was thinking to myself, maybe if she wore something different she would look better, so we went to another store and I saw an outfit that would work perfectly. Of course, Dad says I should stop thinking about clothes and focus more on my training. Did you know that I started training with my dad, Naruto? He's been showing me some really cool techniques that don't get me dirty at all. They're family secrets, so I can't show them to you, sorry. Dad says that I have to be ready for the academy, and he even said that I should start training with Choji and Shikamaru. At this, she grimaced a bit, for once pausing in her out-loud musings. Naruto nodded absently as she resumed with vivacity. I'm kind of sad though because it looks like I'll be stuck with them. It's not that I don't like them, it's just that I'll be the only girl on the team. I wish the genin teams weren't always formed like that. It would be fun to be on one with Sakura. But seeing as the Yamanakas, Akamichis and Naras have been on the same team for the past 2 generations, I guess I'm stuck with it. Choji's really nice, but Shikamaru can be kind of mean sometimes, and they both really don't have an eye for fashion. Besides, what could I talk to them about? They don't understand me, and even if they wanted to, they would just ignore me, I bet. Not like you, Naruto. You're not like the other boys. Wouldn't it be great if we were on the same team together? I mean, if I could choose I would want a team with my best friends, you and Sakura. Before Ino could go on, she was interrupted by fierce coughing from her mother's direction. Mom, are you okay? She asked concernedly. Hanako couldn't answer through her coughing and simply smiled reassuredly as she exited the room to collect herself. When she didn't come back for a while, Ino decided to go after her, telling Naruto to wait behind. Naruto hummed thoughtfully to himself, praying that Hanako was alright. Slowly he ventured around the kitchen, merely looking at things as he waited for Ino and her mother to return. He was suddenly startled from his absent-minded wandering when he nearly bumped into Ino's father, who had entered silently and abruptly. "Hello, Naruto," he said in neutral tone. Naruto gawked up at him shyly, still a little intimidated by him. "Hello, Inoichi-san. What are you doing here?" Inoichi interrupted in a mild tone, though his calculating eyes roved intensely about the kitchen. "We were baking cookies," Naruto explained timidly, feeling as though he had done something wrong when Inoichi's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "With Hanako?" Naruto nodded, biting his lip, just as Ino and Hanako returned. "Dear, you've come back early." Hanako smiled tightly. "Hi Dad," Ino cried as Inoichi beamed briefly at his daughter and then looked questioningly at his wife. "Hanako, might we converse in the other room for a moment?" As the adults disappeared into a side room, Naruto released a breath he hadn't known he was holding. He glanced at Ino for a moment. I think I should be going now," he spoke up quietly. Ino, busy with more cookies, looked up in surprise. "Huh? But you just got here. And you haven't even had a chance to taste them yet." I don't think your father wants me here," he admitted, staring at his feet. "What? No way. I don't want to impose." "Naruto," Ino huffed, putting her hands on her hips. "You don't have to be afraid of my dad." Her tone softened as she saw that Naruto was shame-faced. "It's true though. I guess the whole pupil-less thing is freaky, but my eyes are the same way and you can deal with me, right? I'm not scary, am I?" Naruto giggled. "No, you're not scary at all." Ino nodded in approval. "Right now I'm not. But when I'm a ninja, everyone's going to run away from me." "Yeah, but not for that reason." Naruto burst out before he could stop himself. Ino pouted at him, though a small grin played at her lips. At last she couldn't help but laugh out loud. "You've been spending too much time with Shikamaru," she admonished, a wicked glint in her eye making Naruto laugh again as they dove once more into the batch of cookies. "You're friends with who?" Shikamaru was shocked. Naruto swallowed heavily, unable to meet Shikamaru's piercing gaze. He fumbled weakly. "He said Uchiha Sasuke," Choji offered. Shikamaru gave him a look. "I heard him. It's just, Sasuke? Out of all the kids you're friends with Sasuke?" Naruto wondered if he had gone too far, was pushing his friendship with Choji and Shikamaru a bit too much. The three of them had gathered at Choji's house, and were currently lounging in his room enjoying some snacks, courtesy of Chiharu. Naruto, not wanting to keep secrets from his oldest friends, had revealed his recent escapades with Sasuke. Needless to say, he hadn't quite expected Shikamaru's reaction to be so fierce. "Ah, Shikamaru, why are you getting so upset? I think it's a good thing. Sasuke needs a friend, and Naruto's perfect," Choji remarked, trying to lift their moods. Shikamaru sighed. "I know. It's just, I've seen him sometimes. Always brooding and alone and mean. I've seen the way he looks at people. It's like, he hates everyone," he tried to explain. He glanced at Naruto and, upon noticing that he had upset him, mentally berated himself. "Hey, Naruto, sorry to be so blunt. I'm just worried about you," he trailed off lamely. Naruto peeked up and gave Shikamaru a small smile. "I know." Iruka reacted in the same way. Sasuke's not so bad. He's just scared and sad and angry. But he's been really nice to me. We've gone to Ichiraku's a few times, and the other day he taught me a really cool technique," he exclaimed, brightening as he gazed hopefully at Choji's and Shikamaru's faces, wanting approval. "I think it's great." Choji beamed before glaring at Shikamaru. "Right, Shikamaru?" Shikamaru sighed. All right, I take back what I said about him." He ran his hand through his hair. "This whole thing is so troublesome." He glared pointedly at Naruto. "Hey, if he does anything mean to you, let us know, got it?" Naruto nodded, his friend's desire to protect him making him feel warm inside. "And I do the same for you," he vowed in response. Shikamaru smirked. "Haven't we gone over this before?" He was a bit uncomfortable by the mushiness of their conversation and the fierceness of Naruto's conviction. "Anyone got a change in topic? Training?" Naruto suggested. "Nah, it's just the same old thing over and over again. We could talk about food," Choji said eagerly. That could be good. Well, my mom made another cake last night for her birthday. My dad tried to make it at first, but it didn't turn out so well." Choji laughed. "The whole house was filled with smoke. We had to open up all the windows and everything." At the mention of cake, Shikamaru sat up a bit straighter. Cake? Is there any left? Yeah, I think so. I thought you boys might be getting low on your snacks. Chiharu interrupted as she shouldered open Choji's bedroom door carrying a massive tray in her hand. She set it down between them, and Naruto for one couldn't help but start to salivate at the 3 generous pieces of cake Chiharu had brought them. Wow, thanks Chiharu-san. Shikamaru called as she turned to leave. Oh, happy birthday, Naruto added. Chiharu stopped and faced him from the doorway. Thank you, Naruto, though I suppose I shouldn't be happy to be reminded of my age. She laughed boisterously. I'm sorry I didn't get you anything. Naruto admitted softly, looking down. Chiharu sniffled. Oh, darling, you didn't have to get me anything. Goodness. She smiled tearfully as Naruto shyly returned her grin. Well, why don't you just keep being friends with my Choji here and I'll count that as my gift? But, I'd do that anyways. Naruto protested. Chiharu winked. Exactly, dear. Really, don't worry about it. Enjoy the cake, boys. Naruto sighed resignedly as he turned back to the others. Shikamaru was already engorging himself upon the cake, as evidenced by a dab of frosting on his nose. Naruto exchanged looks with Choji, who had similarly noticed. With a mutual nod, they decided not to say anything, though Shikamaru grew slightly suspicious as they muffled laughter behind their hands. What? He demanded. When Choji and Naruto continued to crack up without explanation, he huffed and decided to ignore them. Whatever. He ferociously dug back into the cake, pausing to appreciate the wonderful tastes in his mouth. Man, Choji, you're so lucky. Your mom is so nice. She lets you eat anything you want. My mom tries to force me to eat vegetables. Sometimes I feel like asparagus is coming out of my ears. That, and with the frosting on your nose, you're like a food monster. Naruto giggled wickedly, causing Choji to spit out some of his cake as he began to laugh hard. Realizing that they were ganging up on him, Shikamaru frowned even as he stubbornly wiped the frosting of his nose. His pout only made them laugh harder. You guys are the worst. Shikamaru complained lightly, shaking his head with a slight grin. Their laughter faded as they returned to the cake, munching contentedly in silence. Then, out of nowhere, Shikamaru spoke up. So what was that cool technique Sasuke showed you? Naruto thrummed his fingers on the table as he chewed on a pencil, his brows furrowed in concentration. Iruka watched him with a bemused grin on his face, knowing that Naruto was trying really hard to focus on his writing assignment, but was in actuality pent up with impatience. You know, I think that's enough of the writing exercises for today, he chuckled as Naruto immediately set his pencil down and pushed back from the table. Really? You mean I can go? You've been talking about this all week. If I kept you here any longer, you'd probably explode, Iruka teased Naruto laughingly. Naruto merely grinned at him as he raced into the bedroom to change out of his pajamas. About a week ago, Naruto had just barely welcomed Iruka home from work before bursting with news of an invitation he had received. Apparently, Hanako had invited Naruto, Ino and Sakura on a special picnic outside of the village. Hanako was preparing a sumptuous meal for them, and was taking them to the special grounds on top of the Hokage monument. Having learned about the Hokages and wanting to be one himself, Naruto was ecstatic to be able to get so close to them. In addition, the promise of wonderful food and friendship set Naruto over the edge in excitement. All week he had bounced around their apartment, chattering happily about what this trip would include as he breathlessly hopped about the place. It had taken nearly all of Iruka's patience to get Naruto to settle down and resume their normal training, literacy routine. Now, Naruto was buzzing with so much energy that Iruka could almost feel it crackling in the air. Oh, to be so 7 again, he murmured wistfully, chuckling. Iruka, am I ready now? Naruto called as he skipped out of their room with a wide smile on his face. Iruka couldn't speak for a moment as a lump collected in his throat. Nothing in his entire life would ever compare to seeing Naruto happy. In just a few short months, Naruto had gained a new insight and was really living. It made Iruka so choked up that he couldn't help but pull the boy into his arms and hug him tightly. His heart soared when he felt Naruto's little arms squeezing him back. Yes, I think you're ready, Iruka said, halting Naruto for a moment to ruffle his hair affectionately. Have a good time, he called as Naruto raced out the door. Even though Naruto was gone, Iruka stood staring after him for several minutes, feeling his stomach swelling with emotion. Pride welled within him, though worry was also present. Worry, the ever-constant companion of a loving parent. Wow, Konoha looks so amazing from here. Ino breathed as she hiked after her mother, trailed by Sakura and Naruto. The small group paused to take in the stunning view for a moment before pressing on. Be careful, girls, Hanako warned as the kids leaned slightly over the side. Far below them the faces of their founding fathers stretched out of the sheer rock, and beyond that, the entire village extended into the distance. Rows upon rows of houses popped up in every direction, and just before them stood the mighty Hokage Tower, with the connecting set of stairs that they had taken to climb the great mountain. With a few more steps, they arrived on a smaller, dirt path. The picnic area is not much further, Hanako called back to them, as she readjusted the large pack of food on her back. She glanced back quickly, her eyes scanning the way they had just come, before resuming the march. After a short walk, they pushed through some bushes and emerged into a flat, grassy clearing surrounded by trees. The kids stopped to admire the setting as Hanako started to set up their lunch. She spread out a picnic blanket and then had the rest of them help her arrange their bentos and cups. Once the food was laid out, Naruto had to gawk at the feast before him. This looks delicious, Hanako-san, he said as he settled himself between Sakura and Ino. Thank you so much for bringing us here, Sakura echoed, though frowned slightly when she saw that Hanako was a bit distracted. The older Yamanaka woman was intently gazing at the path they had just taken, and her eyes were flickering in all directions as if frightened by each little sound that emerged from the forest around them. Mom? Ino spoke up concernedly. Hanako snapped back into attention and laughed lightly. Sorry, girls. I guess I'm just not used to being in the woods like this. Don't worry, Hanako-san. I'll protect you, Naruto promised as he began to explain his training regimen. That's very kind of you, Naruto, Hanako cut him off with a tight smile. Naruto grinned at her in understanding as the girls sparked up a new conversation. As he listened to them, Naruto was content to enjoy the food and their company in silence, knowing that he wouldn't be able to get in a word in edgewise anyways. After a little while, Naruto noticed that Hanako began to grow more anxious. He wondered what about the woods would frighten her so much, and what he could do to make her less afraid. He was about to open his mouth and suggest something when Hanako intercepted his intentions. I'm sorry to interrupt, girls, but, Naruto, would you mind coming with me for a walk? There's something I want to discuss. Can't we come with you? Ino spoke up, regarding her mother and Naruto curiously. No, stay. Enjoy the food. You're not even done eating yet, Hanako pointed out. She turned to Naruto and gazed at him meaningfully. Besides, I'm not sure you two would really understand. What wouldn't we understand? Ino frowned. Naruto turned to Ino and shrugged sheepishly. It's kind of a secret, he said, warming inside at the fact that Hanako trusted him to be her confidant over the others. As Hanako steered him away from the girls and led him into the woods, he wondered what she wanted to tell him. Was it the reason why she was scared of the forest? Because if it was awfully strange for her to be bringing him so deeply into it. Indeed, he could sense her growing unease, and when he paused to really look at her, he could see that she was shaking. Hanako-san, are you okay? Isn't this far enough? No, just a little bit further, Hanako barked at him, causing Naruto to jump at the tone of her voice. She sure was scared. Why didn't they stop? Naruto didn't want to upset her by asking more questions, so he just kept quiet. A few moments later, Naruto realized that they were ascending a slight rise. They continued to do so, huffing due to their quick pace, as they broke the tree line and emerged at the edge of the cliffs. One particular rock jutted out over a ravine. Even on tiptoes, Naruto couldn't quite see the bottom of it. Hanako-san, he said unsurely as he turned around to face the Yamanaka, who was really looking worse for the wear. She was breathing heavily, and Naruto could see beads of perspiration on her skin. Are you? But Hanako held up her hand for silence as she straightened and gazed intensely at Naruto, who shriveled slightly at the fierceness of her eyes. There is something important that I must tell you. Naruto swallowed heavily and stared at her, waiting patiently. Naruto, she said, leaning into him, do you know why you are hated? Naruto blinked and then gasped in shock, recalling Iruka's words. I wish I could tell you, but per the Hokage's orders, anyone that reveals that will not be allowed to live much longer. Hanako-san, you can't. Don't interrupt me, She snarled viciously, causing Naruto to recoil fearfully. Was this it? Was he about to find out what kind of person he really was? He hadn't thought about that for a long time now, though in an instant his doubts forcefully returned to his mind, making him anxious. Come here, Hanako said a little more gently as she ushered Naruto onto the outcropping rock. He followed hesitantly, trembling as Hanako raised her hand and pointed in the distance. Do you see that? Naruto nodded. That's Konoha, he stammered. Beautiful, isn't it? Hanako sighed wistfully as Naruto timidly agreed. But you know, it wasn't always this peaceful. Do you know what happened a little over 7 years ago? Have you heard of the Kyuubi? Again, Naruto nodded shyly. Iruka had told him, though it had been a painful memory for him. Naruto distinctly remembered it because Iruka had been so sad, especially after revealing that his parents had been killed when the Kyuubi attacked. Although Iruka glossed over the details, it had left a definite impression on Naruto at what a tragedy it had been. The fourth Hokage defeated the Kyuubi, right? Hanako let out a bitter laugh. Yes, but do you know how? Naruto shook his head, growing scared at the strange glint in Hanako's eyes. The fourth Hokage sacrificed himself to seal the Kyuubi into a child who happened to be born on the day in question. She stared at Naruto with a nasty smile. That day was October 10th. Naruto felt his world crashing down. He couldn't breathe, he couldn't think. The Kyuubi, the horrible creature that had attacked Konoha, killed so many people including Iruka's parents, was sealed inside of him? That was what that marking was on his stomach. No, it wasn't possible. Unbidden memories of Mama-san returned to him, and he abruptly remembered the hatred in the woman's eyes as she stared at his stomach and the marking there. Naruto shook his head in denial. No, he whimpered, tears blurring his vision. Yes, Naruto. Hanako hissed. The Kyuubi is sealed inside of you. You are the reason it is still alive. Naruto squeezed his eyes shut even as he kept shaking his head. Don't try to deny it. Hanako screeched shrilly. How dare you try to deny my pain? My suffering? Thanks to you, the beast that killed my sister lives on. When Naruto gazed up in confusion, Hanako merely laughed in his face. Oh yes, I forgot to share that lovely detail with you. You see, I never knew my parents. They both died when I was too young to remember them. It was my older sister who raised me, who became the mother I never had. Tears formed in Hanako's eyes as she continued, her voice choked. It was my sister who loved me, and whom I loved more than the world. When she fell in love with a ninja, I was at first upset, but I came to love him as well. We were a family. Hanako paused to control herself. Her face twisted ghoulishly and she sneered. Until that monster came and ninja were called out to stop it. My sister had to check on her boyfriend, and left me behind. I was so scared, so alone. I just wanted her to come back. She appeared lost in her thoughts for a moment before clenching her fist and hardening her voice. But she never did. She died that night along with him. She wasn't even a ninja. She was an innocent bystander. She didn't deserve to die. Hanako set her fevered gaze on Naruto who was sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe. Please, stop, he begged desperately, not wanting to hear anymore. You would like that, wouldn't you, you demon? Hanako spat. Don't think I don't know what you are. Don't think I don't know what you're trying to do. You appear as an innocent, hapless child, but you're really scheming to take over. You're already converting the minds of our children, including my daughter. They all think you are their friend, but they don't understand. They can't see the monster that you are or how you are taking them hostage so their parents are helpless. You want our own children to fight against us by defending you. Well, I refuse to let my daughter defend such an animal. I refuse to let her get hurt. I refuse to be helpless. Before Naruto could think, Hanako had snatched the front of his shirt and yanked him close. She got right into his face. I'm doing the people of Konoha a favor by saving their children, she stated with deadly calm as she grabbed Naruto and held him near the edge of the cliff. Naruto's mind screamed as he wriggled feebly in her steely grasp, his breathing becoming erratic as he struggled futilely. I know that what I'm doing is right, because I know that when you die, the Kyuubi dies with you, Hanako whispered eerily. And you will die. My daughter may have mentioned your pathetic healing powers, but they won't be able to work from this high up, she seethed. No, please, Naruto cried, glimpsing the dark ravine he was precariously dangling over and resuming his efforts. Please, he pleaded, Hanako ignored him as her face hardened in resolve. You will never hurt anyone ever again. No. Naruto screamed as his vision turned red. Suddenly, his body was encased in a bubbly, reddish aura that coalesced into the image of the head of a fox. The disembodied head snapped its teeth and growled ferociously, causing Hanako to gasp and take a step backward, though her grip did not loosen. Instead, it tightened as she regained composure and sneered. Good try, she smiled scathingly, delighting in its feral anger as she got right next to it. But it's too late. Die, you beast. There was a mighty, enraged roar before Naruto was falling. As the wind rushed by his ears and all vision of land faded away, he only had one thought in his mind. Was he a good person or a bad person? No, he was not a person at all. Hitaki Kakashi, codename Inu, was exhausted. He had just returned from a mission, and before he could even take a moment to breathe he was assigned to watch over the Uzumaki kid, seeing as there weren't any others left to spare at the moment. He found out quickly that the boy was with Yamanaka Hanako, her daughter Ino, and her daughter's friend Haruno Sakura on the Hokage monument, as witnessed by the Hokage himself. So, without further ado, he found himself ascending the stairs and following the tracks of the small group. He made it to their picnic area relatively easily and, to remain unseen, kept to the trees and bushes surrounding the area. His eye narrowed suspiciously when he discovered that two members of the group were missing. Where was Hanako, and, more importantly, where was Naruto? After listening to the girls, Sakura and Ino, talk, he had learned enough to know that the pair had headed deeper into the forest, as voiced by Ino in concern. The pink-haired girl, he noted, also looked fearful for some reason. At this, his heart began to pound frantically, though he realized the futility of this bodily reaction and hastily calmed himself. It wouldn't do to have his emotions compromise the situation. With increased speed he tracked the pair through the woods, noticing crunched leaves and bent branches along the way. He tried not to worry too much, though his entire being froze at sudden words. Die, you beast! A great roar echoed out then, and he was overwhelmed by the fierceness of the chakra that washed over him in great waves. He knew it was unmistakably the Kyuubi's chakra, but why would it have activated now? Unless it was trying to protect itself. He hastened his pace, straining his muscles, as he broke the tree line and stopped short. What he saw slammed all breath out of his body. Yamanaka Hanako was standing on an outcropping, calmly looking down at something with her back to him. As if sensing his presence, she turned around and faced him. Her expression was haunted but resigned as she stared fully at him, prepared for the worst and resolved in her decision. He returned her gaze, his body too numb to react at first. All he knew was that his mind was pleading in desperation, praying. No, please, not that. Please let the kid be alright. She wouldn't, but his training was enough to tell him that she had. Even now, he could feel the remnants of her massive killing intent lingering in the air. A spike so huge that it must have been building up for quite some time. It's done, she spoke suddenly, quietly. At this declaration, her shoulders sagged and she seemed to shrivel into herself. The image of a beautiful woman giving way to a tired, old soul that had experienced far too much pain and rage. He almost felt pity for her. Almost, but he had no time to deal with her. Completely ignoring her, he sped toward the edge and glanced over, his heart throbbing painfully as he calculated the height of the fall. The ravine was so deep that the bottom was mired in darkness. He couldn't even tell what lay at the bottom of it. A river? Jagged rocks? Was there any hope that the boy had survived? He prayed that the Kyuubi's healing abilities were enough. Even as these thoughts raced through his mind, his eyes were perceptively analyzing how he would get down there for the body. Boy, he corrected himself. The boy. He would find the boy, and he would be alive. But he would have to hurry. Heavy, so heavy. What was this heaviness? With the realization of weight came the awareness of his body, a numb awareness at first but then a painful stabbing one. The pain. Make it stop. Too much. It hurt, everything hurt. But what did everything entail? Fingers? Arms? Legs? Head? Did he have any of those things? As far as he could tell, he was only a shape, a human mold of absolute pain. Pain with every quick, rattling breath that his damaged lungs somehow drew. Pain as he recalled his eyes, and they miraculously scraped open. Pain as his fuzzy vision cleared enough so that, high above him, he could see the brilliant blue sky sparkling vibrantly. Pain as he watched puffy white clouds drift past, triggering sluggish memories. He had watched clouds before. Blurry faces blinked in and out of focus. Clouds? No, pain. Pain. What could he do to make it stop? He would do anything, anything. Stop the pain. He tried to shake his head but passed out briefly as he was engulfed in pure agony. The moment passed. Darkness receded to blue again. No moving. But it was then as his mind slowly recovered that he became aware of something other than pain. It was such a welcome relief that, for a moment, he concentrated fully on it. An influx of iron in his mouth. Blood, pooling in his throat, getting harder to breathe. Blood? So much blood? Choking. Damn it, kid, raged a voice, turn your head and let the blood run out of your mouth. I will not have saved you just so you can choke to death. Too much pain. That voice was right. He was dying. That voice, the beast inside him. He was a monster. Maybe he should die. No. The voice growled before growing silent. He was glad the voice was gone. Now maybe he could redeem himself by ridding the world of this demon. Maybe he had no choice. He couldn't turn his head, so he couldn't breathe. The blood filling his mouth would soon end him. The irony. His own blood would kill him. Too much pain. Why wasn't he dead yet? Why couldn't someone come to put him out of his misery? But no, that probably wasn't necessary. He was going to die soon anyways. Stars were already twinkling in his vision. Why were the stars coming out already? It was only midday. It didn't make sense with the blue skies so high above him. Naruto. Another voice. Not from within? Who? A friend? No, he had no friends. Family? No, he had none of that either. Then who? Pain. Maybe this was his enemy. Someone who wanted him dead. They would be happy then to watch him die. Oh Kami, no. A shadow next to him, darker than the sky. The brilliant blue was growing darker, closing in upon itself. Better yet, the pain was going away. Movement, agony, sharp, fresh stabs of pain. He could not see the sky, only darkness, jagged darkness. No, he could breathe again. It's okay, Naruto. Can you hear me? You're going to be okay. Empty words accompanied by more movement. The torture set him over the edge. He tumbled into darkness. After an indefinite amount of time, he heard wind, felt it rushing by him. Falling? His body seized in panic as he awakened fully. No, not falling, flying. White clouds carrying him? No, hair? Dog face? Dog with white hair? Arms. Arms were carrying him. Fast arms connected to a fast body. Flying. Where? Home? It didn't matter. He closed his eyes. He was a monster wherever he went.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.